council on that. But before we get into that, we'd like to give Chief Ingram a moment to introduce one of the city's newest, soon-to-be newest employees. So,
Mr. Mayor, thank
yes.
you. City Council, thank you. I just want to take no more than 2 minutes to introduce our newest member of the team, Deputy Chief Sean Sopoaga. Sean was, I met Sean in 2019 during a 8-month executive leadership program in Northern California. He comes by way of Humboldt County Sheriff's. He was a lieutenant there, served about 15 years. He started working with Boise PD last year as a lieutenant. And when I took this oath of office as the chief, I initially asked him if he would be interested. He said yes, but he would have to run it by his family, and he has a really good job at Boise, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to leave Boise just yet because he had just got started there a year ago, and had a change of heart once he started seeing all the positive things happening in Caldwell PD and the direction that the ship is sailing. And so we are super, super excited to have him. He'll be starting on Monday, September 26th, and he'll be responsible for the day-to-day operations of the entire police department, and we'll be implementing a lot of new things. What he currently does is at Boise is he's a lieutenant watch commander overseeing day-to-day patrol operations for the city of Boise during graveyards, so at nighttime when everyone's asleep or partying. And he also oversees the entire department's recruitment drive. So he brings a lot of knowledge. He's got a master's degree. He's got 3 kids, a teenage daughter, and 2 young boys that are under 5, and a lovely wife, and they reside in Star. So I'll pass the floor to him and then get him on his way to back to school night.
Thank you, Chief. It always seems to amaze me that ever since I've known Chief Ingram, he kind of just goes off the fly. He doesn't really plan things as I would have to, as I did today when I was thinking about, okay, I'm going to address the city council. I better, make sure I got my thoughts in place. But first of all, thank you, Chief. I really appreciate your confidence in me, and I will definitely give my full effort, and I won't let you down. Mr. Mayor, council members, it's obviously great to meet you guys finally. I'm very excited for the opportunity that I have here with the Caldwell Police Department and the city. I look forward to partnering with you guys, working with you guys here in the near future, and I'm very excited for the potential of success here within the department and within the city. So I'll keep it short. Like the chief said, my daughter's got a back to school night I got to get to, so she was telling me, Dad, you're going to make it, right? I'm like, yes, I'll be there. So it's very nice to meet you. I appreciate your guys' time, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, and we love it that you're so family-centered, because that's a big deal here in the city of Caldwell. So appreciate you coming, taking the time, and if you get pulled over on the way, Chief Ingram can probably help you out there. So make sure you get there on time.
One last thing, he went to Idaho State in Pocatello, and he was a full ride scholarship as a linebacker with Jared Allen. So his Idaho roots go back to the early 2000s.
I was gonna guess kicker, linebacker. No offense to any kickers, to be honest.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
We're
so excited to have you here, and we're excited to be stealing police officers from Boise rather than the other way around. So it kind of feels good. So anyway, but we appreciate it. We're super excited to have him on board. So thank you so much for that. With that, we'll jump in. So I know, Steve, were you going to kick it off, or is Julie, P&Z? Okay, very good. So.
Yeah, hi. I have kind of just a little overview of what we're going to do tonight. So obviously we're here to talk about parking and thank you. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to start off with an introduction, just an overview of the issues that we're going to be looking at tonight. Steve Jenkins, the Director of Economic Development, will be following me with some lessons from what another city has done to address these issues. Lieutenant Dave Wright of the Caldwell Police Department will be talking about parking meters. Rob McDonald, the city engineer, will be talking about the parking structure and possible locations that we can place it. And then Brent Orton, the Director of Public Works, will be talking about parking structures. So the parking spaces, it's kind of hard to see on this, but there are several parking spaces in the downtown area. They're indicated in the red, blue, purple, and yellow areas on this map. The yellow is particularly difficult to see, but it's up there. There are quite a few of them that we're looking at addressing. So as the city grows, more developments come to the downtown area, and the parking infrastructure continues to be stagnant. A growing city needs adequate parking, and the current available parking does not meet the needs. According to an early 2022 study by planning and zoning staff, the city center area has approximately 360 parking spaces. With increasing building occupancy and the construction of a new 140-unit mixed-use multifamily development in the downtown area, the need for parking will most certainly increase. The parking facilities nearest the city center are the Treasure Valley Community College, parking lots between Main Street and Albany, and the parking lot at 120 North Kimball Avenue, which is indicated on the slide there. Customers struggle to find parking during peak hours, and this negatively affects downtown business, as customers often decide to leave because of a lack of parking. So for possible solutions, the first one is a public information campaign to educate the downtown community on the existing issues and how they can cooperate and help improve the situation. The second one is parking meters. The installation of parking meters for on-street spaces within the city center area, that would require additional staff, but it could have some real benefits to issue tickets to violators and collect money from the meters. And then construction of a parking garage, which given the high deficit in parking in the downtown area, a parking garage could be a good solution for us. So with a public information campaign, this is something that would probably be done regardless of any other measure that we decided to adopt, but it would be a less expensive thing. It can will achieve cooperation with downtown merchants and employees and property owners and achieve some positive results without potential negative reaction from customers. And some of the problems that could arise with that is if the information doesn't get well disseminated, and voluntary programs, as we probably all know, are not always as effective as mandatory programs. And then the parking meters, the funds collected through them would offset the enforcement costs of putting them in. They reduce long-term on-street parking, which means there's an increase in parking turnover, so more spaces are available. And it provides prime on-street parking spaces for patrons of shops and restaurants. Some of the problems with it are the enforcement costs would include staffing, vehicles, and increased court costs, and a negative reaction from downtown patrons. The initial outlay would be fairly significant, and then there would be annual costs to, of course, have an employee, vehicles, the software needed for enforcement. It's been proposed that it could be staffed by 4 part-time or 2 full-time unsworn officers, and the city would probably have to provide the initial outlay for that, but it's possible that it could eventually be funded with the meter fees. And then the construction of a parking garage, that would provide a large number of public parking spaces. It would potentially provide possibly additional retail space, which would be good. And paid parking could provide a revenue source. The building cost, of course, would be quite substantial. Maintenance costs and then management of the retail lease space would be an issue. Various parking structure locations in the study that we did range from about $10,000 to about $15,000 per parking space. We could potentially get the needed revenue through a general obligation, urban renewal, or revenue bond. And possible locations, which Rob is going to cover a little more, are the TVCC lot and the City Hall lot. And then some of the other considerations, I don't know if we'll get to these tonight, but we've discussed them in the parking team meetings, are what to do about handicap parking, if that should be metered or just readily available, what we would do with that. Should the fees be enforced in the evenings and weekends? Is there a way to allow for overnight parking to discourage drunk driving without getting into a situation where people are camping? And then how to enforce the fees or violations that people do get so that there's some teeth behind using the parking meters of the garage. And there were some ideas, maybe the finance department handling it, linking unpaid tickets to vehicle registration, or possibly applying a boot to cars that are repeat offenders that are a problem. So, and that's just kind of an overview of what we're going to discuss tonight, and I will let Stephen go next.
Thank you, Julie. Really appreciate it. Mayor, City Council, thank you so much for your time this evening. This is a very important issue that we all enjoy talking about. I know on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, I hear a comment or two from the public or from a business group, and I'm happy to see that we're tackling this issue head on. So thank you for your time in advance. Just an agenda really quickly. I had the pleasure of doing some research on the P3 partnership, which is public-private. And then also I'm looking at funding for parking. I also spoke with Rapid City, South Dakota, and you all might recall Rapid City as being really serving as a template for what we've accomplished downtown with the Indian Creek Plaza. So they're great partners in that sense. And then, of course, down the street in Boise, Capital City Development Corporation, CCDC, they, of course, have some structures that I took a peek at as well. And then lastly, want to go over a parking structure quote that I received from a contractor that will go unnamed, but was gracious enough to provide a quote just to give us a perspective of what a cost might look like going into the process. So what are public-private partnerships? Public-private partnerships, they're really collaborative. To me, in looking at the research holistically, it just gave me a sense of, hey, we can leverage the private sector to offset costs, financing, designing, building, those types of considerations. As you look at growth within the city of Caldwell, it's been immense. And we've been recognized nationally for the growth that we've experienced here, which is terrific. But as you look at that, of course, it's a major strain on staff and our bandwidth to initiate some of these things going into the process. So, of course, leaning on the private sector would be advantageous in that sense. A P3 collaborative partnership could also help us bridge the gap with funding the garage. As you look at public financing, and Julie hit upon a couple of the options to consider for financing, but the private sector they can just allow us to be a little more elaborate in that sense. And then the know-how, a private sector, group might know exactly how to do a garage. They may have had some experience with that, and it allows a city like us to really leverage that experience that another entity might have over what we know to be true of a parking garage. And then lastly, the thing I want to touch upon is, of course, we can look at different agreements that can be established with the private sector. It can be pretty straightforward in the sense of they want to help with the expertise, the capital, the innovation, and the efficiency, and also the maintenance of a garage. And then they want to lean on the city to leverage our ability to help with, permitting, planning, approvals, those types of things that we have control over internally. So just to touch upon some other aspects of this agreement or partnership, the private sector partner in general will compensate the city in exchange for the right to a portion of the revenues generated. That's a typical format that I had seen across the country. And one of the things that we can look at is, of course, with construction, if that's needed, the private partner can do that and do the design as well, and also provide equity and secure debt financing. We talked about the funding structure that could be extended with that partnership. And then also, just to touch upon the structure of it, some cities took a upfront lump sum from a P3 establishment. Others would look at a payment in the form of a fixed income stream with the garage. And then others would look at how it could be maybe a split revenue stream with the city or county or whatever entity, and then the private sector, so they can split the revenues in that sense. So in a nutshell, you can get pretty creative with how these things are established. There really wasn't a uniform approach that I had seen holistically. However, the most popular option, it seemed was to be an upfront lump sum that was provided from the private sector. Just want to go over a couple of these points here. Again, the private sector would assume some of the financial risk, so that would help a lot with the city. The city can also negotiate and define the caps on, the cost increases within the garage. Something to keep in mind as you look at this option or consider this option as something we might move forward with is the partnerships are pretty extensive. I say in here that it involves typically 30-year terms, but that was on the lower end. I've seen them as high as 45, 50-year terms. So just something to be aware of as you look at this partnership opportunity. And then lastly, we can understand that, again, the structures can be unique. One of the things that I saw that other cities had initiated was an RFP process, request for proposals, an RFQ, request for qualifications, just to understand how in-depth or savvy a private partner could be in relation to a parking structure concept. So that's very helpful as well. Okay, funding mechanisms. So Julie touched upon bonding. So that's one way. She talked about GO bonds, general obligation bonds, which the city can initiate, or a separate or urban renewal district, which could really be used to highlight a particular parcel that we've identified. And through the use of urban renewal, you can build a garage in that sense. And, you can use the increment, of course, to make that happen. And, you can also couple that with special events or parking fees or, those types of things to offset costs in that structure. All right, so we're gonna look at Rapid City, South Dakota. Their CEO of the Main Street Square down there was gracious enough to spare some time to talk a little more. And actually, what's unique about Rapid City, as beautiful as this picture is, the garage is actually very close in proximity to their downtown square. So you can see that it's really a stone's throw away from all the activity that they have centered downtown, which I thought was a unique model that they had initiated. So the garage is owned by the city. Main Street Square is actually leasing space within the garage among other users, and they lease those spaces at roughly $50 per month per stall. The structure was originally built as a two-story back in 1999. They added actually a third level in 2008, which is also something to keep in mind. If we had a garage, perhaps we could start a little smaller and then maybe plan for the future and say, hey, let's add another floor at this point, or do it in that sense, so you're not putting all your chips on the table all at once there. There are 440 stalls total. That is as of 2022 this year. The first floor is metered, while the other two floors are privately leased to downtown business groups. And then they have a hotel downtown that actually leases 70 stalls from them, which I thought was a very good point to acknowledge because, of course, we have businesses and specifically we have projects that I think would show immediate demand for a garage structure, which would allow us to have some security in terms of how the garage might be utilized. And then metering in Rapid City, this to me was really an interesting highlight of the conversation. The meters have been very successful there in Rapid City. They generate roughly $1 million per year, which was tremendous in my mind. It really was a game changer for the city of Rapid City. And the meters, from what I understand, they only cover a four-block radius, while the rest of the parking downtown is limited to 2 hours. And the gentleman I spoke to did emphasize that the 2-hour parking was monitored, so it wasn't just, hey, it's 2 hours on good faith. They certainly go around and check in and make sure you're sitting there for a couple hours, so that's important as well. Parking costs are displayed here just to give us, a frame of reference as we investigate this. And then IPS Group, they manage the parking meters, and then they have an app that corresponds with the meters. And what was unique is I put this in here as well, but a gentleman shared with me that, hey, if you're at a salon or you're getting a haircut, you can actually pay your meter while you're away from the meter, which is really neat. So technology can work in our favor at times, at other times it doesn't, because we've all been privy to Zoom and meetings failing in that sense. But in some regards, technology is great. So it sounds like it really works out well with that software that they have. And then CCDC, this is a good example of a public-private partnership, and I'm going to breeze through this because I want to make sure that the other speakers have adequate time to get through their presentations. One of the things that to acknowledge here is that there are over 3,000 parking spaces and 6 garages collectively, and they're owned by CCDC. And they are operated by another group called the Car Park. So again, that public-private partnership is displayed in full extent here in Boise. And then it shows the parking costs, which first hour is free and then $3 per hour after. And then just to give you an idea of how many stalls are in each garage, so this is something I took from the CCDC website, and it allows you to just have an understanding of what that looks like. And then monthly rates, you can see that at the bottom, they range from about $125 per stall to $190, so a little higher than what we saw in Rapid City. And then parking estimate, this is my last slide here, but really just gives you an understanding of what a garage could look like. I like the concept of a potential garage structure with some commercial on the first floor, maybe gives you a little bit of some flexibility with how it's utilized, and it wouldn't just be strictly or solely used for a garage structure, but have, a secondary use or an ancillary use in this sense, which would add some commercial activity. But here's approximately 80 cars per floor, 400 stalls, 5 floors. Square feet is about 180,000. Price per square foot is $93. Total estimate is $17 million. It's about $42,500 per stall. So just give you an idea of current market rate numbers there. And I will stand for any questions unless we need to move on to the next speaker.
No, I had some, but they fleeted me, so hopefully they'll come back and I'll write them down. Is there any questions, or should we go to the next? Okay, let's go on to the next, and I'm sure we'll have some, though. Appreciate it. Who's up next? Lieutenant Wright. I still don't know if I recognize you all clean shaven.
Thank you, sir. I'm Dave Wright. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about parking meters. I didn't know a lot about them. I'm learning some more into them. You should have all got a pamphlet on the IPS M5. That's the one we got the information on. To be honest with you, we went with that one because Boise's currently using it. They've been using it since 2012. They have a good record on it, have good information on it. It was something we could easily check. They currently have about 1,292 of them. So starting out with the parking meter, on the initial cost, what we're looking at is when you finally get it mounted and put it in a pole in the ground, you're gonna be looking at about $800 per meter. You're probably gonna wanna mount 2 per meter, per pole on there, so you have a dual meter system in there, because you're putting it up, so you wanna have the best cost for what you can get into it. Once you have it on there, you've gotta have some way for the code enforcement officer to read the information on it and be able to issue a ticket. What Boise currently uses is an Android system. It's not part of this company went onto it, so any of the cell phones can give you the information onto it. So they're using like, instead of a meter or a handheld wand, they use their phone with an Android device and they can read off the information onto it. And so with that, to print off the ticket, you're gonna be looking at a cost on a Bluetooth printer, probably gonna be between $400 to $800 on that cost into it. There was a question asked earlier about enforcement of a parking ticket, how do you do the cost into it? What Boise does is very simple, is if you get 5 parking tickets or you have over $200 of fines on your vehicle, they tow your car. And they lock it up, and it's set up on the meter, is set up to where it can do cards, credit cards over the air onto it. It's got solar powered, so it's pretty much set up by itself into it. But with everything on this, both systems, there's this company and another company, you're looking at a software cost, probably gonna be around $30,000 a year. That's an estimated cost into it. The neat things about these meters into it, which people have talked about into it, is you set up zones. The cost for the parking ticket goes, one of their setups is on zones. How close it is closer it is, the higher cost it is. The more you have to walk out, the lower the cost gets. But then they can also set up, you have different hours of rate. Business hours is one thing, after evenings is another, and weekends is a different one. They can all program into the meter. They're very self-sufficient, easy to use into it. And there's 2 different companies that mainly do the software into it. The company DPS and Boise uses Ames into it. The initial biggest thing they said was the startup cost of getting everything installed, implanted, and because you take certain Duro bits to mount the poles into the cement, putting them up and getting them all up and running, and then you have to have the people go by and check them. They also have card readers in some of their cars so they can drive by. You can be legally parked. You have outstanding parking tickets. You're gonna come back and find out your car's gone, can be towed on that part end. That's the basic information we have right now. Do I have any questions?
Maybe just one real quick. So I think these have the ability like to sense when a car leaves
Yes.
and reset itself.
That was
Is
one of the main
correct?
things about it, is you can pay for like 2 hours, and if you leave in 30 minutes, it automatically resets and opens up the parking spot again, and the money's brought into that. You can,
Sorry, just let me step in. So one of the biggest things, the big takeaway for this is it'll actually generate 25 to 30% revenue for the city, as seen with Rapid City, $1 million in revenue, which is, it's basically cost us nothing. It costs us to start up $800 a meter, the software, and then it's gonna be making money $1 million a year for revenue, which would pay for the people that actually enforce these meters.
So, yeah, Counselor Doty.
How many meters did they put up originally to get to the $1 million mark? Do we know?
1,200 meters? We don't know.
Okay, thank you.
I know that it is, so Rapid City is pretty similar size-wise, their downtown. That's who kind of we modeled our downtown after. That's where they flew out to. So I'd imagine, we should find out, but it's probably close to what we would have, I would guess.
Yeah.
But it would be good to know, like, how much. how
But,
many
but,
meters.
but the good thing is about these ones is, like you brought up, Mr. Mayor, that if someone leaves after 15 minutes or 5 minutes, then that space automatically becomes available, and we still collect the money from that meter, regardless how many cars come through for the actual paid. So the days of us driving up and going, oh, I still got 2 hours, let me park my car, well, it's gonna be, they're gonna have to pay another 2 hours, or whatever we set it at.
Did you, say how many we were gonna need and how much we thought that was gonna cost?
I believe what we have is on street parking, we have 82 slots, but if we go with everything in the parking lots, the city parking lots, which we would have to do to generate revenue, we're gonna be right around 12 to 1,300 slots, is my understanding.
I'm sorry, how, 12 to
12 to
1,300?
1,300 slots. That's why this number was comparable.
Is that on street?
That's on street
Correct.
and in the parking lots that we do, the city lots that we currently have put out. the
Okay.
Nice ones you made over by the railroad tracks and everything.
Mhm.
All city lots that we have available for parking right now.
And that, I'm guessing, and obviously this is still to be discussed and decided, but some of those may end up not having meters, like kind of mentioned, the ones that are further out, like the one on the other side of the railroad tracks, behind the movie theater, where you have to walk a great distance.
We would assume that either wouldn't have meters or would be a lower cost,
Mhm.
so it'd be more economical for the person.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
wanna make it appealing to them, make it appealing and reasonable.
But the only thing we want to avoid is encouraging people to overnight park and camp and become homeless there,
Mhm.
which is what's been happening in some of these lots. So we're trying to figure out in this committee the best avenue to actually prevent that, whether it's a gate that comes up and they get a ticket and then they have to renew it every 4 hours, or actual metered parking. And that's for us to discuss.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe just reduce cost on it.
Because that's, as seen in every other metropolitan city, that's becoming a huge issue. I don't want that to happen here.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, so. Yes, Counselor Allgood.
Can you give us a general perception of the parking complaints that we're seeing right now? Do we deal with a lot, or what's our common thing that we're doing?
A lot that we have is, we have those beautiful parking lots, but people aren't using them because of the distance away from them into it. We have a lot of people that they go park in there and they're, like, one business will complain about somebody else's employees are taking up the slots right in front of their business, so the other slots are open into it. And one of the primary issues you look at, anybody try to get around the post office nowadays into it, go check your mail or anything, there's a lot of people parked there for different events into it, and it's hard to get into that one. Availability is the biggest thing we're looking into, close availability.
The police department is fielding those calls?
We do parking enforcement if we have a available officer into it, and with like handicap parking, we also enforce that one.
And that's a huge issue for us, because obviously our call volume right now for priority calls is significantly higher than it has been, the demands, and I want to introduce Sylvia Bayham, one of her duties is to enforce parking violations, which, I have my finger on that pulse. I see the calls every day on my computer screen, and she is inundated, and she's, quite frankly, should not be doing that job by herself, which leads me to the next topic of discussion, which, she does the graffiti stuff, she does permits, all kinds of different code enforcement type duties. And the parking is the one that ends up becoming a political topic every week, because you guys unfortunately will get the emails, and then they come to me, and then sometimes she's off. But, what we're noticing in downtown specifically is we have motorcycles parking in handicap spots, we have cars parking between two handicap spots, we have selective enforcement of, the Chinese restaurant down the street will post up basically 15-minute loading and unloading, which is unauthorized, and then no one else can park there, including myself or anyone going to any other business. And then once one business does it, then every other business, when there's no accountability, starts doing the same thing, and then ultimately everyone suffers. So we're trying to make it equitable for everyone and make it equitable for our staff to be able to enforce that stuff that we have. Another thing that we see is there's a double standard on the parking. So for example, this parking lot down here on Main Street where the old police station was, there's a sign, and don't quote me on this, but it says, free overnight parking, and then literally right below it, it says, authorized vehicles only. So the public thinks, well, is it free? Am I an authorized vehicle? It's very misleading. Yeah. And so we can't have that. We have to be on the same page, so we and her, and whoever's enforcing these things, can come out there, do their job to the best of their ability without getting put in the middle between an issue with businesses, because then it becomes a civil dispute.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Any other questions?
I have a question. Is the lot across the street from the post office metered?
No, it's not.
Is it?
It's a paid lot, but it's not a meter.
Where does that, who are they paying? Because I was there one day, and on one side it looked like you had to pay, on the other side it looked like you didn't. And I'm curious, who's collecting the money? Is that going to the city or is that a private lot?
It must be
Private?
private, and even the parking, so this came up during our parking workshop, is, what we noticed is there's no accountability for parking tickets. So normally people go to collections, we enforce it, we put a boot on their car, take some sort of action, we as in the city, but in Caldwell, there is no repercussion for having 20 unpaid parking tickets. So that's what we're here to discuss, is to best maximize that effectiveness and also make it equitable for people to come and play in our city.
And maybe, I don't know, you were maybe gonna touch on this later, but since you're here and you mentioned about the enforcement and stuff, I know ADA came up.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about looking at that, increasing that fine. Thoughts on that and how this may help solve, I know that there's, we've had some issues on that, I realize on that, and so I guess your take on that.
So, obviously, the ADA is always gonna be the top of our priority, as well as emergency parking zones like fire zones and such. But specifically in the downtown area, the problem is the handicap, and there's a couple of spots where, they're strategically placed where people will frequently park for 15 to 20 minutes and then leave, which will prevent people from their ADA, with wheelchairs and stuff to actually be able to park there. So the misconception is that the ticket's very cheap, it's $10, it's actually not, it's $100, and that's been, in the ticket book for a long time. But the problem becomes on the backside of it is how do we actually enforce that and actually collect that money? And so Idaho and the way it is very honor system based and integrity based. But as you know, people aren't gonna pay their fines. And even when there is accountability or some sort of, disciplinary action taken, that it's not followed up with in the city. So we have to come together to actually figure out what the fines will be moving forward and not only have Sylvia, who's been enforcing them, but actually the city side, making sure we collect their debts, because that's not happening.
And I think a big part of it is just manpower. It seems like, and the goal with this would be generating enough income to pay for that manpower. We're now, excuse me, we can provide better service, where rather than being, I think you've mentioned this a lot,
Absolutely.
we don't wanna be a reactionary
Yes,
police force or city, we wanna be proactive.
right.
And I think that gives us the ability, if somebody's out there, they can be proactive and be looking for those things.
Absolutely, and a lot of these frequent flyers, if you wanna call them frequent flyers, that park illegally and abuse ADA compliant spots, know that it's pretty much just Sylvia driving around, doing everything she possibly can, and if they don't see the pickup truck she drives, then they know that they can park there, because the police officers are simply tied up with other things. I've been driving around looking for the frequent flyers as well, and there are quite a few. Every day I see the same trucks and the same cars. But the problem becomes is, well, if we start enforcing certain things and we're not actually, they're calling our bluff basically is what they're doing. But we need to have an economy of forces and have more people that actually enforce that stuff, and then have the mechanism on the back end to actually capture that revenue,
Excellent.
starting with parking meters.
Very good, awesome, thank you so much. Okay.
Just
Oh, yes.
one more. Chief, before you run off, so it sounds like our ordinances need updated. Whatever we come out with, if you have 5 tickets to be towed, the ordinances
Yes,
must not be, either there isn't one at all or it needs to be updated.
that's correct. Or just have signage that reflects what we actually want them to do. If I say no left turns, but then the sign below it says left turns approved on this time, well, then people are gonna we have traffic collisions. People are getting confused. But specifically with the lot down the street, when it says free overnight parking, then that's encouraging the campers and the homeless and all the other people to just sit there and loiter. And then there's nothing for us to actually enforce when someone says, hey, this car's been here 3 days. So we just need consistent laws so we can actually do our job to enforce them and then actually hold them accountable.
Okay, perfect, thank you so much. Okay, Brent, Rob, or one of you up? Mr. McDonald?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I will, I know that time is already running short, so I will keep this very brief. We, as a economic development team, we talked about garage locations and options, and really the 2 criteria for that are, where are the locations where we have, city-owned property or urban renewal property, and then where are the locations where we have that property where it's actually large enough for a structure. We talked about 4 different locations. One of them was eliminated right off the bat, and that was the parking lot across the railroad tracks at Albany and, Kimball. And we felt like having people cross the railroad tracks to get to downtown wasn't a good idea. And then the other one that we eliminated also is the 510 Arthur, which has just been submitted for RFP for potential development. And so the two that we have left are basically the 400 block along Blaine, which is City Hall, the City Hall block, and that would be half a block, and then also the TVCC parking lot. Those are both locations that are controlled by the city and so could easily be developed at some point into parking garages. The City Hall block has some pros and cons. It would be a parking garage that would be about a half a block, 36,000 square feet footprint. Some of the pros is that it's a city-owned lot. We have the property there. There's no major utility conflicts, and it's easy access. The problems or the cons that we have there, obviously, is those buildings are still being used by the city. And so until the city vacated that half a block, we could not move forward and do anything on that block. If we did build there, we would not have the option of selling those properties to private users, which could be some source of income for the project itself. And then we have demolition costs as well. It's not centrally located, and so from where it's located, it is almost a half a mile from there if you were gonna walk up to Main Street and down to 10th Avenue. About a 9-minute walk, and it could be more depending on where you're at in the parking lot itself. The TVCC location has its pros and cons as well. It could be about the same size. There are options where you could actually expand it to the south on that 7th Avenue right-of-way down toward the creek, or maybe even to the north if you wanted to expand it over that 6th Avenue section of roadway. It is also city-owned and controlled. It is currently being used for parking, and so the change would not be, it would still be used for parking, and as Stephen Jenkins said, you know, maybe the first floor would be retail of some sort and then the parking above it. Some of the downsides is that you may be blocking some of the view of the creek from Blaine. You're blocking the view of the TVCC also, and I don't know how significant that is. And this just shows if you're gonna add on, you could add, you know, another 10,000 feet on each end potentially, if you wanted to expand that out. It's a little bit more centrally located to downtown. It gives you a quick access right to the 7th Avenue Bridge, which crosses you straight over into the plaza area, which is nice. This is just the vicinity map to get a better idea, and those are the areas that we looked at as a development team, and with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. So, just maybe a couple, and then we'll go to kind of the council. So the one, oh, can we go back to that? Yeah, just a picture. And I guess I can keep talking when you get there. So the one, because just so we kind of orient ourselves, so the one in the center there, as far as projects that are, because there's a lot of dirt there that's not dirt right now, or not gonna be dirt. So projects that are now underway with the city include the Creekside development, which is the apartments. And can you kind of show Brent where that is with the mouse, or whoever? Do you have the mouse? Whoever has.
I can, yeah, I don't know. So
Yeah, maybe do you
Creekside
mind
is right
highlighting
here.
just some of the projects that are underway or RFPs that have been recently proposed compared to where the.
You have the Creekside project here. Right adjacent to that, you have potentially a future hotel, and that is part of the Creekside project, if I'm not mistaken. Right here in this area is the Amano project. Right here, just to the southwest, we have the RFP that's going out for a potential development here, and that will include also a section of this right-of-way, so that will be a little bit larger than just the footprint that's existing here. And so, you know, right here in this immediate area, you have quite a bit of proposed development, and there's gonna be a huge demand for additional parking because of that. And I really liked what Stephen shared, where, you know, for some of these uses, you could potentially lease out very specific sections of the garage that would always be occupied by those uses. Brent may speak a little bit more about this when he comes up, but when we did a field trip down in Boise, and They had sections of the parking garage that were gated off, and they were used for a housing complex that was immediately adjacent to the garage, and so it was very secure. And so there may be some of these developments that want to gate off portions of the garage potentially and could lease out those sections to the city.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions for Rob before we go to Brent? Okay, Mr. Orton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'll go really quickly through this. Essentially, we want to touch on just a couple things. Parking structures. We're getting the sense from the community and from the problems that we're facing here that a parking structure may be an important part of the possible solution. And so I'm going to just show a couple different parking structure technologies and a number of examples of parking structures. A quick comment on meters that Lieutenant Wright presented. That middle group is IPS, is the same group. Destination Rapid City, or Main Street Square Rapid City, is using those. City of Boise is using those, and we kind of, I think, happened onto them just in our research as well. They have an integration between all of their, if you have a pay station or a parking meter, because you may want to have a different mode for a parking lot, a surface parking lot, as you would for, and they have integration in their application between all those. So that was, I think, helpful. Wanted to give you a shout out to Tracy McGillick. He is here with us. He is a structural engineer with many years of experience. He works for Forterra, which is here in Caldwell out close to Pinto Road off of Simplot Boulevard. They are a precaster, and they make all kinds of pretty remarkable precast products. Some of the buildings you see in the valley that are just gorgeous and look like stone are actually precast made by these folks, but one of their expertise areas is parking structures. They have a technology that we'll look at, and Tracy has kindly provided a lot of the resources that we'll be showing you tonight for parking structures. Also, as we get through this, we'll probably ask Tracy to just come up and say a word. So I'm just going to show you several examples of parking structures, and then we'll talk a little bit about them. One thing to point out on this particular picture is you see these the decorative patterns that can be created. These are actually cast into precast panels and then stood up, and so you can get about any look you would like. We also talked a lot about what is the simplest, most inexpensive, most efficient, basically optimizing. What does an optimized site look like? And we'll show you that. And this roll of drawings we'll pass around. In fact, I ought to hand it to you now. Is one that Tracy's team put together for our benefit, just to look at what like a totally optimized site might look like. So if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, I'll quickly hand that to Council Register. So you can see here other decorative looks. You can get really fancy with it, or you can be more simple with it. The nice thing is that with the capability to cast in patterns, they can, obviously more decorative, more beautiful is more expensive. So here you see some precast elements being put together, and they have that brick cast into them. So it's a concrete precast panel, and these are precast, pre-tensioned slabs. And Tracy can fix that if I'm getting that wrong. So there are a couple varieties to be aware of. We've got to, of course, get from one level to the next. And so the most efficient design has those levels. You have parking on those levels. And you'll see that here. This is basically a 3-bay. So you have bays on outside and one on the inside. That's the ramp. But you can also do what is called a scissor. And this is a half scissor. So the ramp's all happening on one side and then it's flat on the other side. The more flat you can do, the easier it is and the more economical it can be. Precast panels, they basically need a crane. They need to be able to bring in shipments, so it can be very space efficient, which can be helpful to us in the downtown. Now, cast in place is also possible. An example of a cast in place project, if you walk by the Creekside project that's happening now, that's cast in place. So you'll see a lot of false work. You have to support that concrete until it cures and has the strength to hold itself up. And then, of course, it's also ultimately going to be able to hold up a load on top of that, live loads and dead loads of the habitated use. Very fast to put together. Once they bring those panels out, they can assemble them in weeks and in any weather. In fact, here's a picture of them doing so in a snowstorm. I'm going to skip this. This is a video that shows here this construction site that you see at University of Massachusetts is this is a video of them building that. It's a time lapse. We'll skip it for the sake of time. Not for the sake of time lapse. Just kidding. So this is one of those shear walls that's included, and you can see those these structural loading points are actually hung on there, and so they have a really efficient approach to build this, where they can cast it in one side and then the other side needs to be flat, but they embed sites to hang those girder, I'm losing the word today, but structural points. Just an example of the site disturbance. They got to have a crane and be able to deliver. This is again like that one we looked at. It's a ramp on one side and flat on the other side. The optimized version, this is the drawings that the city council just passed around. We don't really have room for this, unfortunately. The half block will nicely accommodate this design in a scissor format. So without the ramp in the middle, that takes about 180 feet. We need about 42 feet on each end for the drive around aisle and parking. And this would accommodate an ADA van, is kind of the optimized height difference from one to another before you run into structural modifications that would add expense. So I'm going to let invite Tracy to come up and just show you, as he's coming up, to talk about what kind of space per stall. Now, things to know: if we bought a package from them that was a parking structure, he'll talk to us about what the cost per stall would be for that. And then the other things that need to be added, there's architectural elements. We have to have a code evaluation by an architect. We have to do the foundations. In downtown Caldwell, it's likely that we'll have possibly a little higher cost for foundations because there's a lot of clay downtown. And then anything decorative we want to do. And so those, and then lighting, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. It is possible with these to do a structure that could accommodate retail on the bottom, retail on the top, other uses on the top. One idea that we've thrown around is a sky bridge from a parking structure between the Treasure Valley Community College building and the parking structure, as an example. So lots of neat options. And with that, Tracy, would you mind coming up and just introducing yourself? Here's just a little bit on the aesthetic versatility.
Mayor, Council. Brent, he got a hold of me a couple days ago to go over some parking garage information with him. I like the opportunity to work with Brent. I like the idea of doing this in Caldwell because that is our company's hometown as well. So I jumped on it. I didn't want to, you know, we have a proprietary system of precast, pre-stressed concrete. I don't want to take away from somebody else's, you know, post-tension, cast in place, or even steel brace frame, which is pretty expensive. But typically, our stuff comes in right around $6,500 a spot, you know, per stall, to up to 10. You know, that's pretty normal. You can go crazy. We've done some great big ones in Salt Lake City where they had amenity decks with like swimming pools up there on top, and it just makes them crazy, you know, 15 to 18,000 a spot. But where do you want to go with this?
Do you mind, Tracy, just kind of talking about what the cost per stall is on this plain Jane, like this design that we've passed around that you were so kind to put together? What were we looking at cost per stall there?
Oh, you're looking at about right around $7,000 a spot in that particular one. That one's optimized. A lot of the big deal. There's a lot of repetition in that structure. There's the repetition and the volume control labor, and labor, let's face it, is the biggest part of the cost of one of these things. So right around 7 to 8, somewhere in there. I hate to give numbers right now because they changed by the day.
Oh yeah, by the minute sometimes. So maybe just throw some, because we've seen and heard some different numbers now, varying quite a bit. So you're saying around $7,000 a stall. Is that correct? But we heard and saw $40-some thousand a stall. So what's
that's for the precast concrete portion of it. There's a lot more going on there. There's cast in place concrete on all the decks. After we put the structure up, a lot of concrete needs poured, footings, striping. If you don't do the % openness of a particular structure, you got mechanical in there to move air. that's probably something you'd wanna stay away from because it's just massive cost and maintenance. What I could do, and I can get you this information, is we could look at, we just built one on Myrtle Street, and that's the one he's talking about where the apartments are wrapped around it. And, what I could do is get with the general contractor, whom is out of St. Louis, Missouri, and get total cost per stall for that particular structure. It's a little different. It has firewalls all the way around to protect the apartments. But, I can get that information to you, Brent, if you wanna forward that on.
Yeah, that'd be excellent. Yeah, question, Counselor Strata, did you have a question?
Yeah, you know, as critical as downtown parking is, I think the only way we can go with this is the TVCC site and earn some revenue from our current city hall to help pay for that. And I don't think we need any retail or apartments or anything including that because parking is critical, you know, and in my former tenure with the council, we discussed at that time and we just kind of kicked the can down the road all the time, and I would love to have seen that on the Saratoga site, you know. But, anyway, I think we need to be as frugal as possible on this thing, and I think TVCC is the only place I see where we could build it and do not put anything else in there except parking stalls. No, you know, no retail stuff and no apartments, we just need parking, period, so. And I don't know, have you looked at ingress and egress on this thing too? So, okay.
Yeah.
Off of Blaine and into, by the college out or where?
Right, yes, you'd wanna enter at one of the ends,
Right.
where it's flat, and then we would advance up the scissor. There are some slides I could show you a little further on to demonstrate that, but, and you could have one entrance, you'd probably wanna stick to one side for the entrance, cause that'll be more economical. And again, just to reinforce what Tracy said, his number is for the precast only. We still have to do foundation design, and then this picture's up because if you look at, they put those structural, double T beams in here, and then you pour a concrete slab over the top of that. So that number does not include finishing, it's just the precast package.
Yeah.
Also, I'm wondering if we can look at cost on what it would take to make it look like the rest of the downtown. So it's not just one great big huge concrete slab in the middle of all that beauty.
Yeah, I'm with you. There's a lot of wonderful options that way. Probably there is some proportionality between beauty and cost. But yes, there are a lot of possibilities, you know, to embed the brick like we saw in some of those other pictures that's embedded right into the precast.
I think we have such beautiful architecture downtown that it would be kind of if we're gonna do this, then we might as well do it for all the right reasons, which is the parking and to match the downtown, as opposed to just throwing something up. Then we have the parking, but we've now taken away from some of the downtown history and heritage feel that we have. Just my opinion.
And we'd be happy to work with Tracy and folks like him to try to understand what kind of cost differences that could mean and present information to the council to get it.
Mayor?
Yeah, Counselor Strata.
I think I see a couple of downtown businessmen here. I'd like to just see what their comments are on downtown parking, if they have anything. Dan's over there, I see, and.
Yeah, maybe while Mr. Norman makes his way up, yeah, Counselor, all good.
I'm thinking the exact same thing, Councilman. I'm wondering if we could do another one of these and just have the impact of parking meters on downtown businesses. I mean, we're sitting here talking about charging people to park. Is that what our businesses want downtown? And I know Mrs. Minshaw has some very good information as well from Destination Caldwell, and I would really like to hear that before we pull the trigger on anything or move in that direction. So if we could do this again, I would love to.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, no, that is a good idea, cause yeah, obviously, you know, our time is about spent. We've just basically cracked the surface, so, but this is kind of like Councilor Williams, I think our last council meeting got that ball rolling on irrigation. So this helps get the ball rolling, I think, on parking in the downtown. So, maybe before, we conclude, any other, Councilor Doty or Councilor Williams, any comments on direction? Do you like this? Do you wanna see something different or something additional when we come back?
Mr. Mayor, I agree. I think the TVCC location will be the best location. It looks like we can put more stalls there. The retail, I get, Councilman Stoddick's opinion on the retail, but I'd like to see a cost analysis where the retail might actually help offset some of the cost of the building. So clearly, we don't wanna overspend and never get that money back, and it just costs us more money. But if we could make money off the retail space to help fund the building, then I may be open to that as well.
And Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, members of council, one important thing to note, at least as we're looking around and trying to understand these solutions, metering is probably a must if you're gonna have a parking structure. You gotta make it worth it to go park in a structure to get closer, and, cause you're gonna have to charge for the structure. They are expensive to build, and they do have, there's reasonable expense to maintaining a structure too. It's a series of bridges, really, so.
Yeah, and I love our neighbor to the east, but Nampa's garage is pretty much empty, and I think it's because it's all free parking downtown. So why would they pay to park there? So, Councilor Williams?
That's all I was gonna
Okay. So, sorry to take the words from you, so,
Needed to be said.
but yeah, on that. So I think, yeah, and again, trying to learn. My dad always taught me, you're never gonna live long enough to make all the mistakes yourself, so learn from other people. So if we can look at the mistakes that maybe were made in other areas and not duplicate that here and do it the right way. So I think that's really important. So we appreciate, all staff's time in presenting that. We appreciate everyone coming. We apologize we didn't get to any comments tonight. But this is a great start, and obviously we'll be bringing this back and making some notifications on that. Excited to, bring some parking to the downtown. Excited to look, I know we've had issues with enforcing, especially with our ADA, and it's so important, as was mentioned, that's just like, fire lanes and things like that. That is critical parking that we protect. So I think this will help to provide opportunities to enforce that better and to keep those available for the people that need those spots. So I'm excited to continue this, and we will definitely make sure we do this again in the very near future so we can continue these discussions. So if you do have other ideas or thoughts that come to mind, in the meantime, obviously this is just workshop, so there's no ex parte communication, anything like that. So speak with your constituents, speak with staff, let them know your desires and what you'd like to see as we continue moving down this road. So we appreciate everyone's participation. And we will conclude our workshop at this time, and we will be back just shortly after 6 o'clock to begin our city council meeting.
You park wrong in Boise, you're gonna come out with a ticket on your car, and that makes you get into the garage.
Yeah,
Brought a water bottle.
You notice I didn't bring mine.
Yep. Okay. Triple hammer. So we'd like to bring this meeting to order. Apologize for a little late on that. So we did have a workshop prior to this, discussion regarding downtown parking, issues and proposed solutions. So, we got some great information on that. We'll be back again at least one more time, and I imagine actually maybe a couple more times, to discuss that as we continue to look at what we can do to improve, the parking situation, that we have downtown in that regard. So, with that, we'll go ahead and begin this meeting, if I can find my agenda. So again, just welcome you all. Thankful to have so many people here this evening. It's great to have an engaged citizens, in what's going on in their community. So thank you for coming out and spending some time with us tonight. We'll begin this meeting by an invocation offered by Reverend Brian Dyer of the Ustick Road Nazarene Church. So if you'd all stand for that, and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Father in heaven, I give you the glory and thank you, dear God, for these men and these women, for their leadership, and for our city, and for their accepting of such a responsibility and for carrying that mantle. I pray, dear God, that your blessings upon this proceedings. I pray that you give them wisdom, Lord. Not that they would define your will, but that they would discover it. And I pray, dear God, for humility for they and for the people involved here this evening, that all that is done and all that is said would bring glory and honor to you, and people would conduct themselves in such a fashion as to glorify you and themselves. I thank you, dear God, for this time, and I pray, dear Lord, for your wisdom in all matters concerned. In Jesus' name, we'll give you all the glory and praise. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Reverend Dyer, for being here tonight and for that beautiful prayer. We appreciate that very much. Madam Clerk, if you please call the roll.
Alden,
Here.
Williams,
Here.
Register, Dottie,
Here.
Jody.
Here. Very good. Thank you so much. So we do have a quorum here this evening with our 5 council members. We would excuse Councilor McGee, who's up with his family this evening. Are there any conflict of interest declarations? Okay, and that moves us on to our special presentations, and we have these lovely ladies standing up here in front of our beautiful flags. So we'll go right into that. So this is a proclamation for the National Diaper Need Awareness Week. And it says, whereas diaper need for the condition of not having a sufficient supply of clean diapers to keep babies and toddlers clean, dry, and healthy can adversely affect the health and well-being of babies, toddlers, and their families. And whereas without enough diapers, babies and toddlers risk infection and health problems that require medical attention and may prevent parents from attending work or school and may cause emotional distress and depression, thereby hurting the family's economic prospects and well-being. And whereas parents missing work due to diaper need hinders their ability to provide for their family financially, creates workforce problems for small businesses, and hurts the local economy. And whereas the people of Caldwell recognize that diaper need is a public health issue, and addressing diaper need can lead to economic opportunity for the state's families and communities and improved health for children, thus ensuring all children and families have access to the basic necessities required to thrive and reach their full potential. And whereas Caldwell is proud to be home to trusted community-based organizations, including YCAP and many other local partners that recognize the importance of diapers in ensuring health and providing economic stability for families, and thus distribute diapers to families through various channels. And whereas, through their important work of addressing diaper need, diaper banks play a critical role in supporting families, improving infant health and well-being, and advancing our local and state economic growth. Now therefore, I, Mayor Jerem Wagner of Caldwell, do hereby proclaim the week of September 24th through October 2nd, 2022 as National Diaper Need Awareness Week in the city of Caldwell, and would encourage the citizens of Caldwell to donate generously to Idaho Diaper Bank, diaper drives, and support those organizations that collect and distribute diapers to families struggling with diaper need so that all of Boise's children and families can thrive and reach their full potential. And we have these wonderful ladies here tonight. Lisa, if you don't mind, do you mind going to the microphone and just introducing yourself, your organization, and all of these wonderful women that are here with us?
My name is Lisa Kush, and I'm with YCAP as the service coordinator.
Okay, I guess you get to all introduce yourself one at a time, so.
Hello, and I'm Carrie Palmer. I'm the Director of Community Services for YCAP. We're another partner like YCAP. I'm Claudia Weatherman, and I'm representing Terry Riley Health Clinics, and we have about 18 throughout the Treasure Valley. And I'll just say a quick note on the increasing need. As we know, inflation is affecting everybody, and especially families. Diapers are expensive. There's not any sort of aid for people to get diapers except for the diaper bank. And just from our organization, we give them to many of our families that are struggling. In March, we gave 1,900 diapers out. In August, we had requests for 8,700 diapers. So just in that matter of months, families have been impacted. So we're very grateful to not only be able to give these to our clients and patients, but all of our locations and our employees are participating in the drive. So thank you, Mayor.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor, for your time. I'm Tracy Loftus, Executive Director of Idaho Diaper Bank, and I am only here because we have the partners that we do. I'm here with two representatives of our board. We have Megan Larson and Kate Arovich, our outgoing Executive Director, and I'm very thankful that everyone is here tonight and the participation from our agencies like YCAP and Terry Riley. Thank you.
I think we have a couple others. I know she introduced you, but do you want to? Okay. Okay, they're good. Okay, very good. Well, we, again, want to thank you for coming. I think it's a need that we just don't think about a lot, but it is so crucial. I agree with everything that we read in here. I know I was talking with these ladies before, and I think one of the greatest days of my life as a father was the last day I had to use diapers on my children, and so it's nice to have that behind me. But there are so many people out there that still have that need, and as you mentioned, with the prices of inflation, just incredibly more expensive today. So the need is out there. So we really encourage people, if you have the ability, to reach out during that week coming up and to provide those diapers that are in desperate need at this time. So they'll gladly take them off your hands. So with that, I'd like to come in. Yes, I'll be right there. I'll do that. Good.
Also, cash donations on the website, because they can buy diapers at about 30% cheaper than retail. So
So they don't wash them anymore.
What are you thinking about, Jeff?
Do they?
Thinking it's good we don't sit next to each other.
All disposable stuff.
We'd be talking.
Okay, and we do have one more proclamation, that we'd like to read in, and, Melanie Jones and her family is here tonight with us, so we're grateful to have her here. So, Melanie will make her way up to this chair while I read this so she can say a few words after. So, this proclamation states, whereas in 2019, suicide was the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and whereas in 2019, 47 Americans died by suicide with 1.4 million suicide attempts. Sorry, that's 47,173 Americans died by suicide, with 1.4 million suicide attempts nationwide. And whereas in 2019, Idaho ranked 5th in the nation in suicide, and the national rate of suicide in Idaho is 23.18 per 100,000 population, a rate of 9.18 higher than the national average. And whereas in 2019, suicide was the 8th leading cause of death in Idaho, the 2nd leading cause of death for Idahoans aged 15 to 24, and the 4th leading cause of death for Idahoans aged 25 to 44. Now therefore, I, Jerem Wagner, Mayor of the City of Caldwell, do hereby proclaim September to be Suicide Awareness Month in Caldwell, Idaho, and I encourage all citizens to join together in the community in any way that is personally meaningful. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused to be affixed the great seal of the City of Caldwell at City Hall in Caldwell on this 15th day of September in the year our Lord 2022, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 246th. Very good. So thank you so much for joining us. So I know, do you want to share just a little bit with us, Ms. Jones?
Okay. My name is Melanie Jones, and, sorry. My name is Melanie Jones, and we lost our son Jeremy in January of 2020. He went out into our backyard, into our wooden shed, and took his life. He said nothing to anyone. Not his friends, not his teachers, none of us, not his grandparents, no one. And it took 19 years to get him here. All of our children, our 4 children, are miracle babies. The thing that I want everyone to know is that we need to save our children. I don't feel like there's enough that's being done to help our children, and especially in the schools, because we just felt like it just got swiped under the rug. So we need to do something, and this year we started Jeremy's Walk. And then we had it back on Saturday, and we're gonna do it again next year in September on the 9th. And we're going to walk even farther than we did this year. But we want to try to save as many kids as we can and let them know how much they matter. That something needs to be done, and so we appreciate you doing this. Not just for our Jeremy, but for our children here in Caldwell. So, thank you.
Yes, well, thank you so much for reaching out and making us aware of that. I actually know the Jones family. I knew Jeremy, and it was a shock to all of us. and it's one of those, I guess you could say a silent killer, that, you know, there are so many times, sometimes there's not the signs and the notices, and so it's something that the awareness is so important that we need to raise that, where if, you know, if youth or even adults, you know, are, you know, having suicidal thoughts or depression, we need to discuss that. We need to bring it out to an open forum, in that regards. I know that Governor Little recently proclaimed the Suicide Awareness Month for the state of Idaho as well, which I think is great for September. And so we are so grateful to be able to honor Jeremy's life, and to try to raise awareness. And like I said, even if you save just one, it was worth it. We had an amazing event this week with the College of Idaho, called the Youth Forum, where we get kids from local schools and bring them together. These are leaders, that we teach them how to be leaders and how to stand up and to be the one that can make a difference in someone's life. And I was talking with Ron, who's the former ski coach at the C of I that puts this on, and I said, you know, if you just affected one of these kids, whether it's them or one of their friends, that could save their life, this whole thing was 10 times worth it, 100 times worth it over. So we're just grateful to be able to raise that awareness and again to honor Jeremy.
Can I just say,
Mhm.
there's been different sides that we've been given, because we are the faces of suicide. And it's like a ripple. You throw that stone and it's like a ripple and it just spreads. The pain just spreads. I've had mothers that have said they don't want us talking in the schools because they think it's going to cause. But I have had mothers that have brought their children to me. And we have saved their lives. And it has changed everything about them. And now they are just upstanding citizens. So we really would like more done.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And I think we see that fear a lot where, you know, if we talk about it, is it going to increase it? You know, we have drug problems. Doesn't mean we don't talk about them.
Right.
Because of fear of that. So, no, I think that we need to break down those past
The walls.
fears and thoughts and walls, and yes, move into a new dawn. So we're grateful to be able to do that this month in that regard. So thank you so much again for reaching out. So I do have this for you. And thank you again for bringing that to our attention. We appreciate it very much, to do those things and to bring, highlight, for National Diaper Need Awareness Week, obviously the needs there, suicide prevention, to raise awareness on that regards. So that does move us to our next item on special presentations, and this is the signing of the previously approved collective labor agreement between the City of Caldwell and the Caldwell Firefighters IAFF, local number 1821. So Mr. Gigray reached out to me the other day and asked if we could do this signing here, and I was more than happy to accommodate that. So I think, and I'll give you a moment, Will, to talk here in a minute, but I would say it was a monumental year for the City of Caldwell and our fire union and our firefighters, in being able to get some increased pay for our firefighters, get some more firefighters on the way, and then to do this contract labor agreement was just, I think, a new dawn and a new day, and appreciate your willingness. I know we talked several times. Will and I have known each other for a long time. I got some great stories and home videos actually of Will. If you ever want to see them, let me know. But it was actually really, really pleasurable. And we communicated. When Will heard something, we talked, and if I heard something, we talked, and it was just open dialogue. So I appreciated that so much. So thank you for all that you did and helping make this progress go so smooth. So yeah, if you want to take a few minutes.
Yes, I would like to echo those comments. I've had the distinct pleasure of being the union president for the Caldwell Firefighters for a little over 5 years now. I've been with the department for a little over 15 years, born and raised here in Caldwell, obviously. So my blood runs deep in this community, and it does mean something to me. And serving in this capacity means a lot to me as well. One of the things that I've always tried to do as union president is keep an open line of dialogue. Rumors need to be squashed as quickly as possible, that kind of thing. And I've always strived to try to create relationships where I felt like relationships could be made. With that being said, for everybody that's in the audience, if you didn't know, right now, Caldwell Fire by per person and per apparatus is the busiest fire department in the state of Idaho.
Boise Fire runs more calls than we do, but if you break it down to per individual in the department and per apparatus, we are by far the busiest fire department in the state of Idaho, and things just keep getting busier and busier as the years go by. So I just prepared a little bit for you guys tonight because it was this was the first year that things felt like a true relationship, and Councilman Doty served on the committee, and I appreciate him greatly. The things that he brought to the table helped move things along, and it was nice. So City Council members, Doty, Register, Static, McGee, Williams, and all good. And of course, Mayor Wagner, on behalf of the members of IFF Local 1821, the Caldwell Firefighters, thank you. This is the first time in a long time, as far as I can remember, that we as firefighters truly felt appreciated by administration and by you, the leaders of the city. For so many years, we have felt underappreciated and overlooked. But this year, Mayor Wagner and Council, you made a commitment to us that signified a new era and a true relationship with your firefighters. Caldwell firefighters take our job seriously and always answer the call for anyone that needs us. And for years, we have been the most overworked and underpaid firefighters in the valley, often going without for reasons unknown to us. Contract negotiations in the past have been long and drug out. Oftentimes, we conceded just so we could move on. This year was different. After conversations with all of you, including you, Mayor, and with the help of our outstanding new fire chief, Chief Raleigh, right here behind me, we wrapped things up in 5 sessions, and we're signing a contract that gives our firefighters great wages and new benefits that we feel go the extra mile in showing your commitment to keeping the men and women you invested in. You showed our membership that the past is just that, the past, and there is a new Caldwell that cares about their employees. We committed to helping you with overtime costs by sacrificing personal leave time, as well as working with our chief to staff the new ladder truck. Thank you guys again for that. At the correct time with the right number of personnel. This contract truly signifies a new relationship where both parties are committing to working together for the best interests of the parties involved. Thank you again, and we look forward to a long and peaceful relationship with you, the committed leaders of this community. And this is signed yours sincerely, the members of IFF Local 1821, the Caldwell Firefighters. And I do want to say again, thank you very much. This means a lot to our membership, and I think this is going to go a long way, not only in keeping our members here and not doing what's been happening in the past and losing them to other departments in the valley, but it's actually going to go to attracting people from other departments in the valley to our department, which will go a long way. We'll be able to bring in some firefighters with a lot of experience and be able to help out a lot sooner than we were hoping for. So again, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, and I would echo those sentiments as well. And thank you for calling out Chief Raleigh. I want to make sure we did that. It's been great to have Chief on board, and he was instrumental in this as well, so he gets a lot of credit on that. So thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. So I think all that's left to do is to sign. Like I said, typically we don't do this at council, but we wanted to make sure to address this and kind of highlight this, and so we're grateful to do that here. So maybe what we'll do is start with Councilor Register, ladies first, if that works. And if you want to just kind of funnel down, and we'll just follow one by one, sign, and then you can come back up the other way.
Sheet, Diana. There we go.
you wanna get a picture? How would you like it? So, do you want us just up here, or do you want us to come down there? Okay. Okay, thank you again, Mr. Gregory and all the firefighters that serve Caldwell and all of our citizens. We appreciate the sacrifice they do to help keep us safe. So thank you so much for that. So that moves us on to audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on something that is not on the agenda before us this evening? Okay, very good. So that moves us on to our consent calendar. Do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar as written?
Mr. Mayor,
Counselor Allgood.
there are two motions to amend the agenda prior to this.
Okay, so yes, we can address those.
The first motion would be to amend the consent calendar, item number 12, by removing the reference of a development agreement for ANN 2000009, PUD 22-00005, and SUP 22-0000011 for Elante Homes. The second would be to amend the end of the agenda, the executive session, by adding subsection 1C for the purpose of discussing the acquisition of or interest in real property not owned by a public agency.
Okay, very good. So we do have a motion for amendment to the consent calendar, as was stated, basically just removing the development agreement from number 12, and then the overall agenda of adding the item that was listed under number 11 for new business. So do we have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion from Councilor Allgood and a second from Councilor Williams. Madam Clerk, if you'd please call the roll. Again, this is for the amendment to the agenda. Well, actually, we don't need a roll call for that. What's that?
Oh, we get the button.
Oh, the button, okay. So yes, go for the button. There we go. Very good. And voting is closed, and that passes unanimously. So we do have the amended agenda before you. So do we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
And do we have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion from Councilor Stoddard and a second from Councilor Register to approve the agenda as amended. And you guys beat me to it. You're already on it. So it looks like everybody's voted, and voting is closed. Or is that, oh, that's the old one. Okay, that's the old one. I looked, okay. So this one we will do a roll call vote.
Yes.
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 Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Okay, that moves us on to old business, action item number 1. This is a continued public hearing for VAC 22-1 for the partial vacation of plat notes. Actually, before I read it, I just saw that this has been requested to be continued, so I don't need to read the whole thing. So it looks like we are continuing, proposal to continue this again to the date certain of October 20th, 2022. Do we have a motion for continuation of this item?
So moved.
Do we have a second? So we have a motion from Councilor Stoddard and a second from Councilor Williams to continue action item number 1 under old business, VAC 22-1 to October 20th, 2022. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Moves us on to old business action item number 2, public hearing legislative to consider an increase of fees over 5% of that previously charged for the airport, engineering, and building department. Mr. Orton, the time is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So I do know we have a lot of folks here, Mr. Mayor, who would like to speak, I believe, substantially to the airport fees. And so I just wanted to make sure that it was clear that if, that if someone didn't sign up for the fees, this is the right time to sign up to be able to speak to the airport fees. And then also, Mr. Mayor, I guess I would propose one of two things, either that we take the airport fees first, so these folks can have an opportunity to testify, or that we consider the other fees first, and we also have another airport-related item after this that may be of interest to the group anyway. So, do you have any direction there, Mayor? Would you like to do?
So we actually only have one person signed up to speak on this item, signed up in neutral for this. I know there's several that have signed up for the name change, but in regards to the fees, we actually do only have one person signed up in that regard, so.
So, Mr. Mayor, I do believe that there may be people who were not aware. I talked to a couple folks at the beginning of the meeting who weren't sure where to find this on the agenda. So are you willing to entertain additional signups if there are?
Yes, definitely. And so, and we'll want to kind of look at that and see if we need to limit testimony, limit the time that each people speak, just so we can make sure to get through all the people in a efficient manner. So, I mean, can we just go through them all? And then, I mean, if they want to address the airports, they can, but have you just kind of cover all?
Yeah, you
all the
betcha.
things we're going?
We'll do the staff report for all of them to start with. Okay, so, this presentation includes all the fees. I'm going to be very quick about it. In your packet, you have a complete, a memorandum that addresses these in summary, and then the actual resolutions that present the fees and policies for those departments, including those departments that aren't over 5%, but I'll point out the ones that are over 5%. And then just one note, while the water fees are presented here for your information, we did end up determining that we needed to create to elevate a fine in the water fund or the water department. And so that means it'll be over 5%, and we had not previously noticed that that would happen. So there's been a notification that'll now, that will come about. It's actually another agenda item at the next regularly scheduled city council meeting. So water fees are here for edification, but they are not up for consideration tonight. Street lighting charges, a 3.3% increase. Airport fees, there's significant increase proposed in a couple of areas of the airport, and I'll explain that. I'd like to explain that last, Mayor, if you don't mind, and members of council. Why the big increase? And so I've got a couple things to show you to explain why we're proposing that. Building safety fees, significant changes are only that both for building permit and sign permit fees associated with planning and zoning. Those fees are proposed to go from a 10% markup on the building fee to a 20%, and this is simply because to try to address meeting the cost that it takes to provide the service. It takes more planning and zoning time than we have compensated for in the past, so we're trying to address that. Sanitation fees, so we have a contract with Republic Services. They have the right under their contract to take up to a 4.95% increase in fees. And this year, the actual market increase was 8.72% based on the transportation segment of the CPI. That's what they rely on in their contract. And so the contract constrained that at a 4.95% increase, and so that increase is proposed. We have a contract with Republic Services that is in effect until June of 2023, and we are acting on direction from the City Council to negotiate an extension to that contract. We've been pretty satisfied, and the City Council has expressed previously that they are satisfied and desired an extension of that contract. So that'll be forthcoming in the next few months. Engineering fees, in this, the right-of-way permit fee, there's a fine proposed. And previously, the fine and the cost for amending a permit were the same, and we thought, someone who's doing the right thing shouldn't be paying the same cost as somebody who's getting caught doing the wrong thing, and so the fine has been elevated in order to address that difference. With that, if you'll give me just a moment, I'm going to jump over to the airport fees and just explain. I'm going to bring up an Excel document for us. So at the last airport commission meeting, prior to the commission meeting, at the request of one of our airport commissioners, we put together a budget workshop to show, I'm going to have to hit the control button and zoom this, to show whoever was interested in our airport stakeholder community what the budget, how it was composed, and it de facto kind of became an opportunity to show, what we're doing with these fees and why. So we've explored in the past lots of ways to try to improve the airport fund balance. We've been on a steady decline in the airport fund balance for many years. And this kind of launched when the Federal Aviation Administration, and we're very grateful for their support. We are a national, we're on the national integrated airport system. And so we get help from the Federal Aviation Administration. We also have obligations to them, grant assurances that we're required to live by, that are meant to help protect the capability of the national airport system to support aviation, both general and otherwise. We've looked at several different opportunities to increase revenue, and really one was flowage fee, or fuel flowage fee. NAMPA charges a flowage fee for fuel, and it's we examined that. If we charged the same as NAMPA at our last reading, it would bring only about $5,000 in. So we looked at landing fees aren't practical. You really can't track landings when you have a tower, and I think it's something our airport stakeholder group enjoys, is not having landing fees and being able to recreate at the airport and conduct business at the airport. And so I'm going to cut to what has kind of led us where we are. The state statute provides for a couple things. One, it provides for a special revenue fund for airports, which means a segment of property taxes charged to all citizens in the entire city of Caldwell, the entire incorporated area, is dedicated to the airport and can't be used for anything else. And that slice of the city's total levy, it's just one little segment of it. The same thing exists for streets, cemetery, library, and other special revenue funds. State statute places a maximum limit on the special levy of 0.06% or 0.6 mils, a mil being a 10,000th. Just like when we're buying those good old plastic bags, a mil is a fraction, and it's used in taxes for, you'll hear mill rate, that means 10,000th. So this is 0.6 10,000ths is the maximum. Ours is lower than that, but that's what it can be, maximum. And that is paid by every citizen who is assessed property taxes in the city of Caldwell. That property tax revenue, you're going to see a difference between this, and that's inadvertent, but the property tax revenue for the airport fund this year is about $180,000. I think I got it right. Here, dang it, I changed that, and I must not have saved it properly, but this is reading from further up in this budget sheet, under the revenues, and there's about 11,000 more that, or maybe it's 20, we better look. Don't want to be wrong. So the property tax revenue is a dedicated funding stream to the airport, and it is $189,084 in this budget year. So recently we have been able to complete an inventory. For many years, the airport's lease tracking was, leases were entered, we have leases that were entered when the airport was first established here in 1973, if memory serves. So we have some very old leases, and in the old days, many leases were entered with a really long term, either 30 years with a 30-year renewal, 40 years with a 40-year renewal. In recent years, the Federal Aviation Administration has said, no, that is prohibited, you can't do that, and at one point they actually sent us back to the airport stakeholder group saying 5 years is the maximum lease you can have. Well, they don't really have authority to do that. There's guidance under the vast library of advisory circulars for Federal Aviation Administration matters, but we had airport stakeholders that said, how am I going to amortize a loan for a hangar? And so we finally came up with 20 years with a renewal for a tenant in good standing, and the FAA accepted that, but they were, the other challenge that really arose and kicked off this budget, decline that we've started to see for the past many years, is that the FAA changed their match rate. They used to match 95% of our federal grants. They reduced that to 90%, so that was a 5% decline on their part. The state of Idaho would match 2.5%, through the Division of Aeronautics. And so that meant we only paid 2.5%, and that obligation changed from 2.5% to 7.5%. And so running that out for several years of restoring, runway surfaces and taxiway surfaces, et cetera, has taken a toll. And so I'm gonna show you what our, obligations are compared to our revenues here. This year, the city council has made our budget whole, by placing an additional $86,000 of revenue sharing, state revenue sharing there. That's money that can be used at the discretion of the city council in other areas, but it's been placed and to help us to balance the airport budget. Operation only expenses, $529,889. When we subtract out, trying to get to what kind of an obligation do we need to cover with other revenue sources, subtracting out the property tax brings us to $351,000. We have to match federal grants, and that varies broadly from year to year. In a year when we're rehabilitating or even repaving the runway like we did a few years ago, we could be cash flowing in aggregate $2 million, $3 million for a project. And that means that's coming into the budget and it's going out of the budget. And so you can't look at the budget bottom line because these grants for big projects make it go way up and down. So we're focusing on this operation only. And then our match, which is that 7.5%, on average for the next 5 years under the capital improvement plan in the hands of the Federal Aviation Administration and the State Division of Aeronautics, we have an average match for those grants of about $182,000, and that's just simply 7.5% of those total project costs. That is going to vary some as costs undulate. Unfortunately, usually they're going up. And so what that means is that we need to cover a cost of $534,571 with other approaches. So recently we completed a computerized inventory of this long history of leases, including what the area is for each of those leases, and it's allowed us to examine this in a finer, at a finer level of detail, which is very good. And so we have about 431,000 square feet subject to leases that are under what we call the city council rate. And this is the rate you adopt for fees each year. Because a lease for a hangar is based on a contract, it's a lease contract. Some of the legacy leases, we call them, leases that predated that, they had their own increase provisions, and some of them were not very good in that some of them said, well, every 5 years you can take an increase. And maybe when the economy was flatter in the 70s, I don't know that it's ever really been flat, but that was better. But it really creates an inequity, and that inequity is that here we are, right now this rate is 27 cents a square foot per year. We're suggesting it should be, and this is an interim step, 42 cents per square foot per year. That's a massive increase. We're not deluded into thinking that it's less than a massive increase. However, you have our legacy leases that are on average paying about 18 cents a square foot, and there are 558,000 square feet on those legacy leases, plus 183,000 square feet on leases that for uncovered space. We used to have a lease rate that was less for uncovered, but you know, the city, it's not different to the city if someone's controlling that lease property. It's property that can't be used for a hangar or something else. So it's property that if someone wants to tie it up, we now require that they lease it at the council-approved rate. Don't care to control it? No problem. Do care to control it? Then you just pay the council-approved rate for it. We modified our standard lease agreement in 2010, and by means of a communication error and everyone just, I guess, trying to do their best, we did not get to the point where we were locking into that council-approved rate every year. They started with that rate, and then they graduated on their own, which was unintentional. That was fixed only in like 2019, 2018, 2019. And so now all the new leases tie into that. One of the things that we would like to ask the council to consider, this is already a policy, we'd like to strengthen it with a ordinance change. And that is to require that when a hangar changes hands, they must enter into a new lease. And even if the corporation that owns the hangar sells to someone else, we need to eliminate this inequity. And so one of the questions is, well, what happens then? We've got this legacy lease, this square footage for legacy leases. What happens when all those leases turn over and now everyone's paying the city council approved rate? Do we really need to make that big of a jump, right? So to evaluate that, here is what would be, this column here is, this is the actual revenue based on that proposed rate of 42 cents a square foot. That would bring in $181,000 of lease revenue. Obviously, that would be the same. If the legacy leases, both covered and uncovered, changed over to the council approved rate, then that would be another that would go from 100,000 to 234,000, and from 12,000 to 77,000. We have ag land. The ag land is supposed to be at market rate, and our ag land has a variety of amenities that makes it in the market variable. And so we make about $2,000 on ag land. We also have some non-aeronautical leases in the runway protection zone area or future runway protection zone, and those are bringing a revenue of about $4,000. Some with older lease rates, and we're required by our grant assurances to make sure that those are aligning with the market. One other significant change to be aware of in this fee resolution is that non-aeronautical, we have some interim uses at the airport. This is a use that's been approved by the FAA on a temporary basis that will be increased to match market under our obligations to the FAA. And it also, those leases are, they are subject to clauses that would allow us to move to an aeronautical use if an aeronautical use became possible there. Some of them are outside the airfield, so they're never going to have hangar or taxi lane access or anything like that. So there is an increase proposed to those rates, as well as to the office rates at the terminal building. So what this amounts to is we've got to cover this $534,000 number, right? So the sum of all these, even with that 42-cent standard lease rate going in a large increase from 27 cents to 42 cents, we would bring in a total of $300,000. If all the leases were changed over and that they're under contract, that's not possible. It'll just have to happen as they change over, we think. We don't think there's a reasonable approach to do differently at this point. That would bring it up to $498,000. Now, there's some silver lining possibly, and that is that there's a request for proposals out for the east side of the airport. That's going to mean the creation of additional lease space, and that's going to help offset the cost of operating the airport and maintaining those surfaces for the rest of the users. So we've provided an estimate. There's, based on the existing utilization on the more or less built out side of the field, the west side, we have a utilization of about 14% of the total land is under lease. And so there's about 659,000 square feet of space, and I'll just show you a little graphic here. This is the space that's under lease. We're going to the middle of the runway, and this is coming in the middle of the runway. This is property the airport owns that's under RFP. The terminal building is included in here, so this is not perfect, but it's it gives us a rough prediction. That would bring in, if that has the same utilization as the other side of the field, that would bring in approximately $379,000 additional dollars. Sorry, excuse me. That's utilization. That's the square footage that would be under lease. I apologize. $89,000 of additional revenue, and that would bring all of these together to $588,000, which would meet and surpass this that needed number. Now, there will be more surfaces to maintain, of course, when that side of the airport builds out. So we'll also have a slight increase in operational and grant matching expenses. But that is essentially, that's the reason why we're proposing this large increase. We do need to cover those costs. We're fortunate that the city council has opted to provide us funding from discretionary sources to help make the budget whole. And so I should comment on just a couple other things. There is a hangar at the airport that is meant to be disposed of, and by disposed of, I mean declared surplus. We're gonna ask the city council to declare it surplus. We have a recommendation from the airport commission to seek that from the council. And then it would either be auctioned, that's required by statute, we have to at least place it for auction. And then if it doesn't sell at auction, it can be sold on the open market. The revenue associated with that, we anticipate that revenue coming back to, and are asking the city council to send that revenue back to the airport fund. The hangar was purchased by Urban Renewal in anticipation of an airframe and power plant mechanics school by Treasure Valley Community College, and that program fell through, and so the hangar is not needed. That will bring in some revenue. We have some various predictions, but right now seeking an appraisal for that hangar. Let's say that it brought in $1 million. That number's been thrown out. I really don't know if that's realistic or not. And it does have some code violations that have to be rectified before it would be usable. But if it brought in $1 million, we have had some discussion of an opinion, well, why don't we wait to increase the fees and spend that down? That is certainly possible. I will tell you, I don't think it's the right thing to do, and here's why. Right now, when we get a grant from the Federal Aviation Administration, the finance department is kindly finding places to borrow money from other funds in order to pay our bills until the FAA reimburses us, because we can afford only the match. It would be appropriate for us to have enough of a fund balance that we can cash flow our own projects. And so it'd be nice if some of that, whatever that hangar brings, presuming the city council would go our way and let us put that in the airport fund. We need to set aside some segment of that so we can pay these large draws. And happily, we don't usually have to pay the whole amount of a project at once. We pay draws from the contractor and then seek reimbursement immediately from the FAA, and that's about a 30-day process to get that reimbursed back. I'm just concerned about the viability of borrowing money from other city funds in order to cash flow those projects. So that is the summary of why this proposed increase in the airport lease rate. I absolutely recognize that this is very distasteful. The reason that we haven't proposed this in more gradual steps is because it took us until this year to get our hands on good data to know what these area splits were and be able to really evaluate what a per square foot should be in order to provide that service. So with that, I'll stand for your questions.
Okay, I'm gonna ask two quick ones, and we'll go to council. So, just make sure I'm reading this right. If it is approved by the council to increase it to the 42 cents, we still will be negative $234,000 in the airport budget this year, is that correct? And that's gonna be, offset by just money from the general fund, is that how that will be made up, or do you know?
At this point, it'll be offset by sales tax and probably budget withholding, probably just not using the whole budget and trying to.
Second question, is there any way, if you put in the current rate on that one table, will it change it to show if it doesn't change, how much in the hole we would be? Like if it stayed, is it 27 cents right now?
Yeah.
So if you change that number to 0.27, is that possible just to compare?
There you go, 298.
And what was it before? Sorry, my little short-term memory is not what it used to be. 234, okay, so it goes up about an additional $60,000. Is that correct? Okay. Those are my two questions. Okay, council, any questions from any of the councilors for Mr. Orton? Mr. Stoddard?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Orton, the 42 cents, how competitive is that with our nearest neighbor, Napa, for instance?
Good question. The last, Nampa's rates are about 33 cents as of last year.
Okay.
And so I don't know what they're looking to do this year with their rate, but we generally can get our hands on their last year's rate. And I'd be happy to see if I can get that information, what Nampa is proposing to move to, or may already have taken to their council.
Okay, I think we need that, those rates before we can come up with a decision. And again, being a newbie on on the commission. I couldn't believe the legacy rates when I saw them, because again, that's just terrible, and it doesn't pay for recreation. I mean, the taxpayers pay for recreation that somebody else is doing. And it should have been run like a business, you know, whatever the cost is, you gotta cover it, but,
Yeah,
anyway,
absolutely.
okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good question. Counselor Doty?
I just want to also add to that, that the fee increase that you're requesting doesn't go to every taxpayer in the city. It's the users of the airport. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah, so you've got folks who own hangars and they're leasing the space under their hangar. And so, and possibly hangars, possibly space adjacent to their hangar. Say they want to be able to park aviation-related equipment next to their hangar. They could, yeah.
So I guess to me, it's not as much of a concern to know what NAMP is charging because we supplemented it with taxpayer money. In my opinion, that the fee increase should, or the lack of funds should come from the users of the airport, since every taxpayer is already paying into the airport whether they use it or not, so.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councilor Doty, at the expense of muddying the water, I will tell you that one of the sentiments of the airport stakeholder community is they pay property taxes on their hangars. And so, it's certainly reasonable to expect that some of that's coming back, but it's also, of course, that the property taxes we pay wherever we are, whether it's as a hangar owner at the airport or somewhere else in the city's limits, we're paying for services. We're paying for fire, we're paying for police, and we're paying for roads, et cetera. So,
Any other questions? Yes, Counselor Allgood.
So, we were, rebuilding some of the taxiways. Is that completed, or are we still in that process?
Right now, this is a design-only year grant. I can show you what the grant layout is here. So in 2023, what we'll be seeking for a grant is reimbursement for land purchased on the east side of the airfield.
So my question basically is, realizing we're not going to meet our required amount of money, do we have money to meet our matches through this process?
So we'll be drawing upon that. Mayor, I should have included this. We'll be drawing upon revenue from that sale. We'll be spending fund balance down, is what we're gonna be doing. Right now, our fund balance, the audited fund balance at the end of fiscal year 2021, 2022 is not over yet, so we don't have an audited fund balance, right? At the end of 2021, it was $91,000. Our projection for by the time we're starting this next fiscal year, and this is assuming we underspend the budget some, which we do at times, is we predicted a fund balance of $83,000 at the start of fiscal year 2023 on October 1st of this year.
We have had the good fortune of being able to step up whenever money is available from the federal government because we can meet our matches. And I don't want to lose that ability because it gives us a quality airport. Anyway, that was my question was, are we gonna be able to continue to meet our match going forward based on what you're talking about?
Well, if the city council lets us take the revenue from that hangar sale, that'll give us a little bit of a buffer still. We just need to not, one thing we don't wanna do, I think it's wrong, it's not business-like at all to presume that we're gonna spend that down until it's gone and then address the revenue versus expense stream. So, but yes, we're gonna probably have to buffer with that some.
Okay, very good. Councilor Williams, you have a
Mr.
question?
Mayor, thank you. And Mr. Orton, I'm trying to think of an intelligible question because there's so much at stake here, but what you're telling me is our airport use fees are not covering our airport use needs.
Correct.
And I guess what I'm thinking is if it doesn't come then from the airport use, where else would it come from? And I guess the answer I'm hearing is it's just coming out of taxpayers' money if we were to find another place in the budget, but the budget's already been set for the year. And so we're kind of at a spot now where we need to do something in order to bridge that gap. And I guess that something is what you've been wrestling with now for a while, as you've looked at the different options. You presented several, the flow, the landing, now the fees. were there any other considerations? Were there any other possibilities? Were there any other revenue streams that we could look at that could possibly help in a significant way?
You know, so the fuel flowage, property tax, landing fees isn't actually even on this list because it would just, you gotta be able to track landings to make that work. Tie down fees, and there's a significant increase proposed in tie down fees. Just trying to keep these all equitable and appropriate to, so we'll have to look up that resolution and I can show you what that is. Sorry, I just can't remember the numbers off the top, so gotta look at them on the screen.
There's a lot of numbers on there already. So I know, a little bit of a headache just looking at them. So, any other questions from council for Mr. Orton?
And Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, one last thing. At the end of this item in your packet, you'll find a strike-through version of all these resolutions, so you can see what were they and what are we proposing that they move to.
Perfect, excellent, thank you so much. We appreciate that. As I mentioned, we do have one person sent it, but we did also receive an email. So I received that, forwarded it all to you, it was just late this afternoon, so I'm not sure if you're able to see it in your emails, but it is printed out. So I'm just gonna, this is from, Mr. Randy Neary had sent this in, so I'm just gonna summarize, what he had said in regards to this item. He indicated he does agree that the fees need to increase. However, he would like to see more of a step approach. He did ask in his email that this be continued and tabled further down to have more discussion on the matter. And again, he does, again, summarizing what he stated, agrees fees need to increase, but is concerned with the drastic increase in such a short amount of time. It should be done over time, and to possibly continue this item is what his email more or less stated.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's good input, and I totally appreciate where he's coming from. This is a massive increase. It's really a shame that we haven't been taking more aggressive increases in the past so that we weren't asking for such a big jump now. I think it's a valid point.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so, Mr. Seward is the individual that signed up to testify. Was there anybody else? I know that a lot of you had wanted on the others, so we do have one other, looks like, that wants to testify in this item. Okay, very good. So, if you just state your name and address, and in light of time, if you could try to limit your comments on this item to 5 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Stan Seward, 4003 Preston. And so I'm in Caldwell, and I will mention that I pay taxes towards the airport, both from my house, when I pay taxes there, and also from my hangar. And Brent educated us on that at the budget meeting before the airport commission, and that was a good talk, and he managed to leave out clouds and some other things, and we got to business. I do want to talk big picture about public goods, and I think the airport is a public good, just like the park is a public good. I drive by the parks all the time. I don't see somebody collecting fees for park usage as they go in. Maybe there's some system for soccer fees or something, but there's things that we do in our community because we just need them. Police, fire, parks, and I think an airport is one of those things. We also see it as economic development. So, big picture, is it something we're gonna invest in as a community, or are we gonna extract every penny out of the users that are the users of the airport? I just put that question out there. I did sign up for neutral because I think the rates are low, but I think we're walking perhaps into a wreck because our leases are all over the place. And what I mean by that is we sampled amongst ourselves. We looked at three of our leases that are from different vintage or different dates. So a 2000 lease or a 2007 lease had a base rate, so you pay this much per square foot, and then a CPI adjustment plus a clause for adjusting based on market analysis or professional study. So that's back in 2007. So those are old leases. There's an option for a market analysis or professional study. 2021 lease only mentions the city council adjustments, no caps. So you guys are king. what you guys say goes, 2021. The problem is, in 2010, okay, what we're seeing from about 2010 to maybe as late as 2021, we see a clause for adjusting based on just CPI, and there is some leases that say the city council rate, but it says it cannot exceed CPI, okay? So you guys could say 20%, 40%, you can say whatever you want, but the leaseholder then looks at CPI and says, no, we're not doing that, we're doing 3%. And I was contacted by one person that said that happened last year. It was jacked up farther, and he got an attorney and apparently talked with the city, and then it went down to CPI. So to call some legacy leases and council rate leases, that's a gross oversimplification. I don't think we know what kinds of leases we have. And that came up in the budget meeting. Lisa talked about straightening things out when she joined the airport, and that was 2021. So I have a fear we have a bunch of versions of leases out there, and we don't know what we have, and we're walking into a real problem. So one of the leases I looked at, 2018, okay, it has council rate limited to CPI. So you guys can say whatever you want, but it's gonna go to CPI. That lease is gonna go till, that's gonna go another 15 years, okay? So we've got those, we've got the really old ones that if we wanted to do a market study on, we could maybe bring those up. So I don't know how you're breaking your numbers out. But I would like to see somebody with some reading skills go through the 239 leases and put them each in a pile of how the rates are allowed to adjust. Because what we heard in the budget meeting is there was kind of a scattering of lease possibilities.
Is that the 5 minutes? Do you want to take one more minute? Is that all right? And just kind of wrap up your final comments on it?
Sure. I guess I will, I'll finish saying that, you know, we have this concept of fairness, and it's pretty standard in our culture, fortunately. We expect things to be fair. But there's also another layer on this, and that is, you know, the FAA, when we take FAA money, they expect us to administer the airport fairly. So however we do this lease with the hangar owners, it needs to be equitable in that sense, or we lose our funding, potentially. You know, it just causes us our problems. And on the tie-down fees, you know, I often hear Rob talk about, Mr. Oates talk about derelict aircraft, and I think part of that problem is it costs, what, $17 a month to park an aircraft? So we could probably double that, and that might help that. But it's a cheap place to keep an airplane that's falling apart, so thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you so much. Appreciate you respecting that time limit as well. I know we had, you covered it? Okay, perfect, excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, very good. So that concludes that. If there's, do we need a motion to close public testimony on this?
Question.
Oh, yes.
Is there a way for, City Hall to go through those leases and see who's doing what until all the leases can be the same? I'm assuming when they expire, there's gonna be some sort of uniformity when they're reissued?
I imagine so. It takes some time and some staff, I'm sure, but I would imagine, but Brent he's at the microphone to answer that, so.
Before we do a vote on
Yeah.
fee increases, is there a way for somebody to look at the leases to, because it sounds to me like some people are gonna be taking the brunt of this and other people are not, and then some people are in the middle and we don't really know. So is there a way to examine the leases and then make those price increases fair across the board, whether it's, so it's not just one amount, but maybe somewhere where it evens it out?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Council Register, thank you for that comment. I appreciate that. So in terms of, do we know what we have? I don't have my hands on what Stan has examined. I don't know if it is not impossible. I think that there have been some instances with, where someone grabbed an old lease and used it, and that would account for, I don't know for a fact that that's happened. I think that, that was mentioned at our Airport Commission budget workshop, but, we do have a standard lease, and that is to be used, and Lisa, our, at the airport knows what lease that is, so that problem should not be experienced going forward. So Stan said we're walking into a problem. I hope, at least in that respect, we're walking out of a problem, out of a big problem, because it is a big problem. And then to your point, yeah, this is a challenging one, because you have someone with a lease agreement, let's say from 2007, that says that it's going to grow by the CPI, and the CPI includes carrots and vegetables and gasoline and, you know, a whole myriad of things that may not really represent what kind of inflation is happening in the industry. And so we can't, that's a contract. So we can't make an adjustment to that unless there's a provision within that lease to make an adjustment. As Stan mentioned, he's encountered a couple that have maybe you can do a market study. But we do have all of these leases quantified. We know what the lease rate is for every single lease, and we now, just as of the beginning of this year, we now have that in a computer system, happily. That's what's allowed us to be able to say we have this many square feet, and I appreciate Stan's feeling about there's certainly more division in these legacy leases, but I've got to make a presentation that's understandable and simple enough to just get on with. So I think we have that information. I wish there was a way, but I will tell you there's one thing the city council can do that is going to help us get to a fair situation there faster than anything else. And that is just reinforce the policy in ordinance that when a leasehold changes hands, when someone sells their hangar, they've got to enter into the new lease. I appreciate the concern expressed about that the council becomes king. Well, you're the king on every single fee category in the city of Caldwell. And you're constrained by the state statute to make a lease or to make a fee that represents the cost to provide the service. So we always have to justify the fees that we recommend based on what it costs to provide the service. So it's, hopefully that will be able to balance out and all become fair. This isn't happily it isn't something where we're just stuck. Someone's got an 80-year lease, because hangars do change hands. People sell their hangars, and so that's an opportunity for these to roll over, even if there's 30 years left on their lease. And so that's a mechanism through which we can approach that fairness faster. Beyond that, we have looked at we would love to find a way to make this fair across the board instantaneously. Just at this point, I don't, and even with consultation with our legal counsel, I don't know of a way to do that.
So could we maybe just follow up with Council Register's question, like looking through, because we have copies of all the leases, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Kind of looking through that and creating, you know, this pile is legacy leases, this pile is maybe in the middle, kind of a combination, and this is the city council, I think the termination is leases.
Mm-hmm.
Looking and just, I think, is that kind of what you're asking, how many, like, what number of legacy leases do we have, what number of current leases do we have, and what's in the middle on that? Is that more or less kind of Council Register what you're?
Yeah, because I guess I'm wondering if the, like, middle of the road people, as opposed to the higher paying people, can maybe be charged a little bit more so that at least those two groups are the same.
Yeah, and I think if it's in a lease, we can't go back and say, oh, we messed up 3 years ago, we should have charged you this, we're gonna start charging that. We're kind of stuck where it is on that. So I guess really the council, before we do close the public testimony, the question is, do you want to continue this to
I have
try to
another
gather more?
question.
Okay, yeah.
So we can change the rate on the council fees without breaking a lease?
So what happens is you set the city council rate, you set the fee rate.
So they're in a lease with the city council rate, and if that changes, that changes.
Yeah, so under the current standard lease, someone's lease just ties into that.
How many legacy leases do we have?
I can tell you what we have in terms of square footage. Well, it's about half and half, actually. We have a few more that are council rate leases than we do legacy leases. but we have a little more area under legacy leases than we do council rate leases.
Well, this is probably a ridiculous question, but
Go ahead.
can the legacy lease people volunteer to increase their rate to make it easier for the, I know, I'm just putting it out there. I'm thinking of out-of-the-box solutions. Now, can they volunteer to increase their rate a little bit, keeping their, keeping whatever for their counterparts that are paying more?
Of course, they could volunteer to do that, but.
I'm just putting it out there. That's also a possibility, right?
I know, that's actually, because I know people said you can pay more
Right?
income tax than they charge you for sure, so they'll take the money,
I'm just
so,
saying,
yeah.
like if we get to in all honesty, if we get to a point where we can't afford to run the airport, is that a solution? You know what I mean? Is everybody pitching in? Sense of community.
I like it, I like the thought, so, other questions or comments for Brent, or,
Mr. Mayor?
yes, Counselor Stoddard?
If we put that together, I'd have to be on a negotiating team for the city, so.
See, Mr. Stoddard, I didn't quite understand. Would you mind repeating
If
that?
we can put that together, as far as renegotiating some of those voluntary leases,
Oh, sweet.
I'd be happy to be on that committee.
And I'm not suggesting that they would wanna pay the new lease rates. I'm saying, if you have all three groups, whatever that is, then the council rates, the middle rates, and the legacy rates, and if everybody's willing to come together and say, look, we'll up a little bit here, so that these guys over here don't have to take all the brunt, is that, or is that not a possibility? I don't know, I guess that's a conversation for the committee, but I wonder if we're not in a position right now to decide on these rates until we've exhausted everything, and I think Stan has a question.
Yeah, so, let's finish some of our discussion up here, so just hold that for a second, Mr. Seward. So, I guess question is, I guess, does the city council want to, it sounds like maybe you want to continue to get further discussion and things like that, but we do have, so this isn't the only item though, but there are we have 1, 2.
I guess when we return with this, I personally would like to know how many lease or legacies we have, how many middle of the road, how many are on these new ones, and exactly how that works. So it's easier for me then to know what I'm looking at.
And I appreciate that. What we could do is probably bifurcate that. Back in the olden days, every lease was different, unfortunately. So the legacy lease, essentially, we're placing it under the name legacy lease if it's not a lease that associates with the city council's rate constantly.
But then you said some of them have a lease agreement where any increases go only to a specific place?
Yeah, so the consumer price index is an index that's used to gauge the basic change in the value of money or the basic change in the cost of goods. And so some of these leases in this median time, many of them, even the oldest legacy leases, had some kind of CPI reference. And the ones from 2010 to 2018 or 19, I can't remember which year it was, they have that too. If there are any, as Mr. Seward mentioned, that are past 2019, that still have those, that was us making error as a staff and actually entering someone into the wrong lease paperwork.
Quick question, Mr. Orden. So if the airport proposed fee increase is continued, or we just withdraw this time or bring it forward in a month or two after discussion, do you foresee any significant issues? I mean, it would just continue at the current rate, correct, in regards to the fees on that? Do you see any significant issues if another, say, month or two was taken before a decision was made on that?
Mr. Mayor, I don't think there's an issue if we take more time on it. There is a minor issue perhaps, and that is that the budget is based on projected fee increases that we've talked about with the council in the past, as we did this one. And so you'll be, once you get past October 1st, then you'll have a span of time during which that may not happen. There is a little bit of uniqueness too, in that, for these leases that aren't just tied to the city council rate, they are gonna make a change typically on their lease anniversary. So if I entered my lease in January, then that's when that change is gonna happen for those guys. So if they are tied into the city council rate, but have a CPI limit, one of these interim leases, I guess I'll call it, there's some variety there. It's not a big deal. It could mean that someone would enjoy the lower rate for another year if their anniversary date is between now and when the council makes their move on the fee.
So it would behoove the city council to try to get to an answer sooner rather than later?
That'd be good.
So, I mean, still take some time, but don't take 6 months.
That'd be really good, yeah.
Very good. So we do have, again, this is the flavor of the council, but there are 6 resolutions, and appears that there's no issues on any of the others that were presented. It's mostly on the airport fees in that regard. So, again, the council's flavor on that, but we could approve the 5 others and not approve, either you could approve the 5 and not approve the airport one and have that come back whenever is appropriate, or we could set a date certain, I think, of that one to October 20th. That would give just over a month on that to see if you could get something together in that regards. So I guess kind of up to the council and if you feel that we can get that done in a month, and I guess staff input as well, and come back perhaps October 20th with the airport fees and review that again.
Yeah, and I think we've got a pretty good breakdown on that in our computer system, so I think it wouldn't take us too long to put, just having a good understanding of what the council would like to see, how you'd like us to bifurcate that database out so that it's, so you're seeing, what kind of a speciation of lease they're looking for. But, yeah, I think we have our hands on that. We know what, generation of lease that they are.
Yeah. Counselor Allgood, did you have
And I just wanted to add one admonition as we move forward. I completely understand what Councilor Register is asking for, but at the end of the day, we still have a shortfall at the airport that we've got to figure out how to cover. I think that's very important not to forget that we do not want to lose, we have such a quality airport, and we do not want to lose that ability to continue that quality airport.
Yeah, very good. Thank you so much. So, again, if it's amenable to the council, I think Councilor Doty's ready for a motion to approve the resolutions minus the airport, and then perhaps set that one of the date certain of October 20th. Public testimony is still open, so that did not close, so there would be opportunity to testify on the changes, and the hearing just continues, and we would provide that opportunity so you could speak to the differences, the changes at that time as well. Is that more or less kind of where we're at? Okay.
So we on action item number 3?
Yeah.
So, Mr. Mayor, in regards to action item number 3, I'll make a motion to approve resolution numbers 316-22, 317-22, skipping 318 to 319-22, 320-22, and 321-22. And do I need to make mention of when we're gonna meet on 318?
I think we're there. We're actually on number 2, not number 3.
We on number 2?
So I think they're kind of, 2 is the public hearing, then the resolution is number 3. So I think, yeah, I think you wanna add, then the continuation of. Oh. And you could do it in the same motion, or no? And you can add it, yeah.
Right, continue 31822 will be continued, and the public hearing will be continued. It's gonna stay open. So,
yeah,
you want 2 different motions, is that what you're saying? So in regards to action item number 2, I make a motion that we keep 318-22 open to public hearing to a date certain of October 20, 2022.
Okay, very good. Yep. So we have a motion to continue, resolution number 318-22 in regards to the airport fees, with public testimony still open to a date of October 20th. Allow staff time to work through those, get some numbers, and also we'll have time or provide additional testimony at that time.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, yes.
I think it says 21 on here and 22 on the handwritten note. It is 22, okay.
Okay, very good. So we have a motion from Councilor Doty and a second from Councilor Allgood to continue, resolution number 318-22 to a date certain of October 20th with public testimony still open. And the voting is available for you at this time, it appears. Okay, there we go. Okay, and voting is closed. And that passes unanimously. So now we need a motion for the other resolutions for approval.
Action item number 3.
Correct.
All right, we'll make a motion, to pass, I guess, since we don't have to adopt the resolutions 316-22, 317-22, 319-22, 320-22, 321-22.
Very good. Do we have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion for Counselor Doty and second from Counselor Stoddard for approval of the resolutions as listed. The voting is open. And again, this does not include the resolution regarding the increase of fees for the airport. There we go. All votes are cast. Voting is closed. And that motion passes unanimously. Very good. So that concludes action item number 2 and action item number 3, with continuance of the airport fees to date certain of October 20th, with testimony still open. And real quick, want to thank our students. Sorry we didn't get to you on that, but Mrs. Adams was here with some of her wonderful students from Caldwell High. We appreciate them enduring with us tonight as long as they could. So, wish you all good luck in the football game tomorrow night with homecoming. So thank you for being here. Okay, that moves us on to old business, item number 4. Consider resolution authorizing city staff to reserve and subsequently issue 25 parking passes to Aztec Development for the development at 115, 117, and 123 South Kimball Avenue. I think, Mark, you're gonna make a quick presentation on that?
I will, thank you, Mayor. And I do, because this is an issue that comes to you from sort of the Urban Renewal Agency that has been working with Ken Senga of Aztec Development on a redevelopment project in downtown Caldwell at Kimball and Arthur. Just by way of background, because this is not the Urban Renewal Agency, I know most of you have experience with urban renewal projects, but just to give you a brief background, the way those work is that when an agency owns a property it would like to see redeveloped, it requests proposals. And so developers have the right to come in, respond to that, and propose certain redevelopment, and those are competitive proposals. The Urban Renewal Agency selects among them and then identifies a preferred developer. Then there's a negotiation for a contract called a DDA. So Mr. Senga and Aztec Development were the preferred developer, but we have not reached that DDA phase. And this particular project took a little bit of a turn. It was what the agency owns at the site. You'd be familiar with it on that corner. It's a dirt lot. The Urban Renewal Agency owns half of that. And that was where the project was proposed, and that was what Mr. Senga, who's here tonight, proposed on, redeveloping essentially half of that site. As that was progressing and moving forward, the rest of the site became available. Mr. Senga was interested in that, ultimately purchased it, and that led to a discussion about expanding his project to include the entire site rather than just the half that the Urban Renewal Agency owned. As the project expanded, he ran into an issue where he felt like he needed some dedicated parking. And so staff has been working with him for quite some time to try to figure out a solution to his need for parking. There was a close look at whether or not there might be parking done beneath the ground level there. So it'd be basically a basement parking arrangement. That proved, because of the size and the access, location of utilities in the alley, it just simply proved infeasible. We looked at trying to secure with him leased spaces on private property in the vicinity. Mr. Jenkins in particular was involved in that. I think Mr. Senga looked around too. We simply couldn't find what was necessary there. That left us looking at parking on publicly owned, city-owned parking spaces through some kind of a permit arrangement. And so what's proposed tonight is and again, this is not obviously an agency decision, this is a city council decision. So whether or not to approve some sort of an arrangement like we have discussed with Creekside. This would not be on-street parking spaces, this would be off-street parking, for example, along the railroad tracks. And there may be other sites that might be identified for 25 spaces. So that's the request tonight. Is the city interested in making 25 spaces available? These would not be specific spaces set aside exclusively for this use. This would be, we would identify an area of numerous spaces, and these people with permits would be able to park in whichever one of those happened to be available. The nature of the permit would exempt them from time limitations and payment for parking. With those spaces in place, Mr. Senga feels like he could redevelop the whole site. It would be a residential over commercial development. We have yet to flesh out those details. That'll be very important if this request is approved, and we'll work with Mr. Senga to do that. If the request is not approved, the direction from the Urban Renewal Agency is that the project's probably not viable and that the agency will reissue the RFP and look for, alternate developers to develop the site. So that's the request and a little bit of the background. I stand for any questions if you have them.
Any questions from council for Mr. Hilty?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor Stoddard.
Mr. Hilty, so those particular spaces will not be marked for this project? I mean, if they get on a parking lot and how do they, I'm trying to figure out the mechanics of that.
Yeah, what I envision, Counselor Stoddard, is it'll look like what we have been negotiating with Creekside. So the agreement will identify parking areas, and the permits will be valid in those areas.
Okay, will there be signs up in the individual parking space?
No, I think.
This is for permit only, or?
No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's all right.
Thank you for the question. I get the question. The short answer is I don't know. I mean, it's good, that's gonna wind up well, so let me back up. It will not be for permit only. Okay, so those spaces will continue to be open to the public. Signage and so forth probably will devolve to whether or not that's required for enforcement. But these are not exclusive spaces, and they'll still be open to the public just like they are today.
Okay, then next question I had, so, when we have functions down there, for instance, the Christmas parade and all the other stuff, what if there's no parking spaces available for these people, then what?
Well, what we've got in mind is that's part of the cost of living downtown.
Oh.
And so they'll have to figure out some solution to that.
They meaning,
the
Aztec company would have to, or?
The permit holders, the individuals that have the permit, it's just simply not going to guarantee them a space. Now, the vast majority of times, there's spaces available in those public spots, as we know, but there are times when there are not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. Any other questions for Mr. Hilty? Very good. I know that, Mr. Zenga, I think, is still here with us unless yes, there you are. I was wondering if we bored you enough that you had left. So do you mind coming forward and speaking on this matter? So, Mr. Zenga is with Aztec Development. So if you want to take a few minutes, and time is yours. If you don't mind just stating your name and address for the record.
Ken Sanga, 1307 West 4th Street, Boise. I'm open to questions at this point, I guess, if there are any questions. To answer your question, it'll be like a window sign of some kind, I'll say, permit parking, so they will be able to drive around and find wherever they can find the parking and park there. The only advantage of that will be that they will not be cited or towed if they are parked somewhere in the public parking.
So will they have a sticker in the window or something?
Right,
and-
right,
okay.
right.
Good.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Zenga?
I don't, but I thought of one for Mr. Hilty.
Very good. Well, real quick too, is there anybody else have a question for Mr. Zenga? No? Okay, they're taking it easy tonight. Thanks so much.
Falls in you guys.
Okay, Mr. Hilty, Council President Allgood.
Just thinking down the road question. 25 apartments, occupants will change hands. Is there anything in here that indicates who's responsible for making sure those parking permits are collected and reassigned? That technical process, so that we don't end up giving someone a new parking permit and pretty soon we got 30 out there and then 30, if that's making sense.
It does, and there's nothing in the resolution. I think the resolution is certainly the expression of intent to reserve those. Now, it'll be, I guess we have to ask Mr. Senga, 2 or 3 years until we have developed the project and this comes into play. In the meantime, we will be developing an agreement that will cover those details.
Okay. Yeah, I can just foresee that kind of getting away from us.
Wind up with too many permits?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, very good. And I might ask a quick question. I don't know if Mark or Brent on this one. So when you said 2 or 3 years, hopefully we might have a parking garage downtown in 2 or 3 years. And I'm not sure how Creekside is, because I know that we have designated kind of similar where they'll have like a tag or whatever to allow them parking. So when a parking garage comes into play, does that change this at all? To start having them go to the parking garage and charging them to be able to park in that facility, or does that make sense?
The question does make sense, and the answer is no, that the parking that that they will do is essentially free. Now, we do have the right to move them around, okay? So, if we need to move them into a parking structure, we can do that, but again, the permit concept would remain. So there is flexibility for the city to make adjustments in the future, but at least with Creekside, the parking would have to be, free. With this development, that's a detail, I guess, that you guys can talk to us about. But the request is that it be similar to
Okay.
Creekside.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Hilty? Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Any other questions for any of staff? I guess I should ask that as well. Okay, very good. Then I guess in regards to, let me get back to, so this is again, old business item number 4. So it is, discussion amongst the council. If you do have questions, you're free to ask, staff, or if you do have a question for Mr. Zenga, he's available as well for any questions you may have or discussion.
I just wanna, if I can make a comment. Counselor Doty and I sit on the Urban Renewal Agency, and so we have hashed this at length. And, Mr. Zenga has really put together a good project and put a big investment into that corner. And there was a lot of discussion about whether we should do this or not. And I am not for continuing to build residences downtown. I don't think we have the situation for it at this time. But in this particular case, in this particular case, I think it's the right thing to do. I think we're at a phase and, we have a product here that is coming into place on that corner that'll be very valuable to the entire city. And as we discussed it in Urban Renewal, I believe it's a positive thing.
Very good, thank you. Any other discussion or questions or comments? Or any motions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Williams.
I move that we adopt resolution authorizing city staff to reserve and subsequently issue 25 parking passes to Aztec Development for the development at 115, 117, and 123 South Kimball Avenue.
Very good, so we have a motion to approve the resolution. Again, this is resolution, we don't have a number on it. What's that? Oh, so resolution as stated by Councilor Williams. Do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
So we have a motion and a second for approval of the resolution. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, with that, the voting is open.
Not from Diana.
Decision maker.
Very good. All votes have been cast, voting is closed, and that motion passes unanimously on that. Okay, and then that concludes that item, and moves us on to new business, action item number 1. And I believe we do have, she's gonna grab that. We are going, do you wanna take a 5-minute break, Sam? Okay, so we're gonna actually take a 5-minute break, leave you on the edge of your seats, and we will be back shortly to continue, with new business action item number 1. To the Caldwell Executive Airport and directing staff to work with the Federal Aviation Administration to accomplish that change. In regards, or in light of time, we are going to limit testimony on this one. We'd ask for no repetitive testimony as well. I think it's pretty straightforward on this resolution, and so we are going to allot 5 minutes for staff to make their presentation, and then we will limit it to 2 minutes per person that come forward to testify, whether in favor, in support, or neutral, on that. So, and Angie's gonna help keep track of time for us, so, once you do hear the timer go off, if you are in sentence, we will provide you with 10 seconds to wrap up your final statement, then we can move on to the next. So, Mr. Orton, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So this item is, I'm gonna give a quick history and then share this, staff report presentation time with Mr. Oates, the airport manager. So I'm gonna tell you first what this item is. At the most recent airport commission meeting, the airport commission voted to recommend to the city council that the name of the airport be changed from Treasure Valley Executive at Caldwell to the Caldwell Executive Airport. When this change happened, which was just last December, from Caldwell Industrial Airport And industrial today makes us think of smokestacks, right? But back in the 70s, the idea was, this is an airport that supports industry. And so, when this idea was first broached, and it kind of was born out of the airport master plan that was completed last year, that, hey, you should look at renaming the airport. And I think that that's something that pretty much everyone can agree to, that Caldwell Industrial Airport is like, what? Why is it called that, you know? Because it just doesn't mean what it did back at that time. And so, I think there's some feeling from our airport stakeholder community. We presented this at an airport commission meeting. We held a workshop with city council in December, and it was a fast turnaround. And it led to a feeling by some of the airport community that, that it was a ramrod, name change. So I'm gonna leave that topic at that and just finish by saying that when the name was first presented to me, Treasure Valley executive, I was like, no, it has to have Caldwell in the name. And I kind of got persuaded that it was a good move, just because of the economic development drive. And that's a really important function of the airport for the city, is that there's a lot of interest that we get from our incoming economic development folks in the airport because of its capability, for instance, for Simplot to bring in an executive, or the hops farmers to bring in somebody to come and inspect their product that their grower's creating for them, you know. So with that, I'll turn the time over to Mr. Oates, and thank you very much.
You want to pause that? And we'll let Mr. Oates know how much time Brent left him. 3 minutes, so good job, Brent. That's a record. It's a monumental occasion. We're good. Thank you, Mr. Oates, for being here. If you want to finish up.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I'd like to continue what Brent opened with, and just let you know that the Treasure Valley Executive Airport at Caldwell is a name supported by both our professional airport planning firm and our city staff. The Airport Commission's hasty vote to recommend tonight's proposed change was conducted by 4 commission members, while the other 3 were on excused absence from that particular meeting. It's hardly a mandate. Pilots who use the airport come and go, but they have no actual stake in the airport's success. The overwhelming majority of hangar owners have told Lisa and I face to face over the past few weeks that they have no issue with our current name. And name-related air safety hype, you may have heard, is carefully crafted to frighten non-pilots. I have flown as a professional pilot, and there is no significant safety issue. There are also no airport location issues related to this name. Pilots somehow find Twin Falls, Sun Valley, Blackfoot, Bonners Ferry, Kellogg, Salmon, Butte, and even Las Vegas airports, in spite of names that don't mention their communities at all. Our name makes us unique among the other 4 Caldwell airports in the United States. Changing again reduces that uniqueness. The airport cannot be both the hometown airport some pilots remember and the national airport that it is. We are now 8th in the United States for confirmed based aircraft count. Our airport users are a mirror of the Treasure Valley. For most of the past year, we have had the ideal name for our airport's bright future. In the coming weeks, we expect proposals on major development efforts in 3 different areas on field, with executive-sized hangars to start those projects. It's working. Your airport staff recommends that you do not change the airport name that we will be living with for many years to come.
Good. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Hold on 1 second, see if there's any questions. Is there any questions from council for either Mr. Orton or for Mr. Oates?
I had one quick question.
Yes.
For either one of them, I don't know who can answer. Although this name is a formal name change, it's an informal process, correct? We didn't have to notice it and do all this kind of stuff, or did we?
That's correct. Yeah, the name of the airport is completely at the discretion of an airport owner or sponsor, and the city of Caldwell, with your leadership, is this airport's owner and sponsor.
So as far as any legal requirements, we met all that we didn't even have any legal requirements.
No, the only issue arises if an airport sponsor attempts to change a name to something that is confusing or conflicting. And then FAA raises a flag and says, hey, let's think twice about this. But there was no issue with our current name, and there wouldn't be any issue with the proposed name either.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from council for either Mr. Orton or Mr. Oates? Okay, very good.
Mr. Mayor, just an additional
Mhm.
answer to that question. There is an instance in city code that references the Caldwell Industrial Airport still today. And so that will have to be fixed, and we propose that that be fixed when the next ordinance update is done for airport-related things.
Okay, very good. Sounds good. Thank you so much. Okay, so we do have a number of people signed up, to speak on this. Before we get to those, I would like to, Mr. Neary did send, as I mentioned, he had emailed in, and he had actually two items he had discussed in his email. The first was the rate increase, and the second was in regards to the name. So I'm just going to, it is a short paragraph, so I will just read, what Mr. Neary had indicated, and all of you should have this email. It says, Mr. Mayor, I would like to voice my opinion on the agenda items tonight for the city council meeting. The name change is a hot button, and even though I really have no opinion on what the airport is called, I do believe Caldwell Executive is a nice compromise for the group that likes the new direction the airport is going and the group that is fighting in the new direction. So that was Mr. Neary's comments in regards to, this item that's before us tonight on this. So, and thank you, Mr. Doty, for letting me borrow that. Okay, so that will move us on to, those signed up in support of this request. So we do have a number. Some have indicated not to testify, but I'm just gonna go through each name. And if you do wish to come forward, if you changed.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I should have pointed out, we do have a number of members of our airport commission here tonight.
Okay.
I just wanted to recognize them. I apologize.
Very good. No, that's fine. So yeah, we appreciate you being here. Mr. Neary is one of those, he's not able to be here, said he wanted to, but he is traveling and taking his daughter to Colorado, I believe. So, anyway, so if you are airport commission member, if you do come up, please let us know, so we can know that. So again, some of you indicated not to testify, but we'll go through and see if you do or not. And again, when you do come forward, we would ask you to limit to 2 minutes. We'll be timing again just so we can keep this as efficient as possible and to provide, new testimony. So if you just simply agree with the person before you, you can just simply state that if you like. So the first person is Wendy Frazier. You're good. You indicated not to testify, just that you're in support. Okay. Oh, you're gonna defer to Mr. Frazier. Okay. Mr. Frazier, if you'll please come forward. And if you would state your name and address for the record, and then you'll have the 2 minutes.
I will. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Brad Fraser. I live at 2881 South Appia Place in Meridian, Idaho. My wife Wendy and I are hangar owners at the Caldwell Airport, and we're to speak in favor of the name change to Caldwell Executive, principally because of safety concerns. There's been a lot of talk about safety, but I want to be very specific in terms of why this is a concern for the pilot community. The Caldwell Airport is uncontrolled airspace. There's no control tower. The principal and only modality to allow pilots to identify their location relative to the rest of those airplanes is radio calls. Radio calls. So let me give you an example. Here's my wife, Wendy, taking off from the Caldwell Airport. On her radio, she announces Caldwell area traffic, 8301 Alpha, downwind Caldwell. That's what she says, Caldwell. Now that works great as long as everybody hearing my wife Wendy flying that Cessna 170 knows where Caldwell is. The problem is what's called transient air traffic. People flying in from Washington or California or Oregon, they're looking at their computer monitors or their sectional maps because a change was made to Treasure Valley Executive. So they're flying in and they look at their map and it says Treasure Valley. And they hear my dear wife Wendy say Caldwell. And they say to her, and this is not a hypothetical, this has happened to her twice. This has happened to other pilots on the field. They say, well, where's Caldwell? Where's Caldwell? We see Treasure Valley. So you have my wife flying Caldwell and a big old airplane coming in from Washington or California. And the irony is that you want to invite this transient traffic. That's your goal with this airport, is to invite transient air traffic, all of whom are seeing Treasure Valley on their maps. So here they come, flying in, Treasure Valley, Treasure Valley, Treasure Valley, Caldwell, 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 and what happens? It's just a matter of statistics before we see a mid-air incursion or a runway incursion. Why? Mr. Oates has well instructed all of us that this is one of the busiest airports in the country. Don't you think it's just a matter of statistics and time before all those numbers play against us and we have Treasure Valley, Treasure Valley, Treasure Valley, Caldwell, 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 and something bad happens? Let's get us all on the same page and call it Caldwell Executive Airport.
All right, thank you so much. Hold on one second, do we have any questions? Are there any questions from council? Okay, thank you so much, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Did he do all right, Mrs. Frazier? So, okay, very good. Okay, just want to make sure. Let's see, so the next person, Bart, and is signed up not to testify, is that correct? Okay. So if you'll just state your name and address for the record, and then
Owens,
we'll
eleven
frame it for 2
twenty-three
minutes.
Powering Drive, Caldwell, Idaho. When Rob Boat stood up here and said that the commission voted on this, but 3 members were absent, there was a quorum, so it was a legal vote. Then you got Mr. Neary emailing you, another commissioner, saying, I'm for it as well. What he's saying doesn't hold any water. That's all I have to say.
Quick, are you a member of the commission?
No,
or-
I'm not.
Okay,
But I attend the meetings because I wanna know.
okay, thank you so much. Next name on here,
Sorry, did anybody have any
oh,
questions?
yes, thank you for reminding me. Is there any questions? So, okay. The next name on here is Dennis, and I can't quite make out the last name. It indicated not to testify, but just want to make certain. Okay. Next one is, again, indicated not to testify, Mike, is it Cholas? Had indicated in support, but not to testify. Okay. I think it's Doug Candles. It indicated not to testify, but in support. Okay. Stated that he agrees with the previous testimony. Next, indicated to testify is Vivian Firkin. So if you please state your name and address for the record, and then we'll time you up for the 2 minutes.
My name is Vivian Firkin. I'm at 19335 Lower Pleasant Ridge Road in Caldwell. I am a commissioner, and I am also a pilot and a business owner on the airport. This name, I have been here twice now, telling you exactly all of the reasons for having this name changed. And Brad has covered the safety issue of it, but I think my thing is this, is that Caldwell is our community. This is our precious Caldwell Airport and Councilman Dottie, you had mentioned the fact that, you know, the taxpayers are paying for this, for something that they don't use. That's not true. This particular airport brings in lots of prosperity. It brings in people that come into the community to work in these, it provides for the jobs that are here. So, yes, they're paying a portion of the tax, of the money on there, towards the airport, but it benefits all of us. And that's what we see, is that this airport is a Caldwell asset. Caldwell, not Treasure Valley, Caldwell. And that's what I just want to, because you've heard from me already 2 different times, so you know everything I have to say. But it's my heart that this airport is Caldwell, because we are an awesome community and we need to be proud of our airport. And basically, that's all I have to say tonight.
All right, excellent, thank you so much. Are there any questions from council?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilor Doty.
Maybe just a comment, so
Yes.
it's cleared up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe either I misstated it or it was misheard, but I absolutely believe the airport is an asset to the city of Caldwell. I was just clarifying with Brent as to where those taxes were coming from, but I absolutely support the airport. I think it's very important to the city of Caldwell.
Right, and we all contribute to it. I mean, all of us, that even if it comes from our property taxes or part of our property taxes and we're contributing to it, it is an asset to every single person in this area, in this community. So it's very important. And Caldwell is so important, the name, that people know who we are.
Very good.
So, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, appreciate it. So if you could please, yes, don't clap, we'd appreciate that. We know she did a great job, but if you'd please hold your applause, we would appreciate that. Mr. Mark Firkin had indicated in support but not to testify, is that correct? Okay. Sean Pilkington indicated in support but not to testify. We'll say that's correct. Steve, I believe Steve Graham had indicated in support but not to testify. See a head nod. And then, last one on the list is Mr. Stan Seward, who wishes to testify. If you'll come forward, Stan. And again, if you'd limit your, comments to 2 minutes with, no repetitive testimony, we'd appreciate that. And then Sam for
Yes.
questions.
Stan Seward, 4003 Preston Avenue. Brad covered the safety aspects very well. The only thing I would add to that is the survey that we did, when we asked people about traffic congestion in Caldwell. about a quarter of them came back and said, yikes, it's getting dangerous. So we know that our user community is very concerned about safety, and anything we can do to reduce pilot workload in that environment, the airport environment, is really gonna help. And this name change would do that by reducing confusion. I'm a process guy. I like processes when they're followed, and I think it creates a healthy outcome. And I appreciate Brent mentioning that the user community felt this was ramrodded through. And this checks the box of going through the airport commission correctly this time. So you guys got a recommendation from the airport commission, and as a process guy, I'm all for that. The last thing I would say is just that you know, we do have a pretty good turnout here, but we had Reno air races going on, so a lot of our pilots are gone, and you probably would have seen twice as many here if the Reno air races weren't going on. So that's what I have. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Siewert? Okay, thank you so much, appreciate it. So that is all that is signed up in support of this request. We do not have anybody signed up in neutral. Mr. Oates has signed up in opposition on that. Is your testimony earlier sufficient on that? Oh, Mr. Jenkins? Very good.
Thank you, Mayor, Council.
Yeah.
I apologize for not signing up, but just wanted to share a couple statements, if I may. Stephen Jenkins, I serve as the Economic Development Director here on staff at the City of Caldwell. 411 Blaine Street here in Caldwell. I just want to thank everyone for attending. It really shows a dedication to the city and to the community when you show up and share comments in this nature. So I certainly appreciate that. And I've had an opportunity to talk with a lot of the members of the audience tonight. And just want to start off by saying my comments are not meant to be combative or hostile or contentious. It's really just a matter of explaining the reasons why I believe staff arrived at the point in which we have in terms of the name that was selected for this airport. So from an economic development standpoint, many of the prospects that look at our community, they look at it from a regional perspective. They look at the Boise area, rather, the Treasure Valley is what they call it. So they put a radius and they put radii all around the valley just to identify exactly what the criteria might be in relation to this particular region. So from that perspective, of course, we developed a comprehensive plan for the airport. And Mayor, you know this to be true, but a comp plan is really a North Star for how things are going to develop. And it's really constitutes how development should occur at our particular airport. And that is what we follow. And we felt that this name in particular, Treasure Valley Executive Airport at Caldwell, was just congruent with what we felt was a regional approach to development. The plans for this airport in particular are very grand. I mean, they're going to change dramatically. You talk about hangar space. Of course, the RFPs were mentioned, requests for proposals were mentioned at the airport, which is going to dramatically change the outlook of development for years to come. So we felt as staff that this was a way just to capitalize on really a regional approach. And believe it or not, we're clustered in the Treasure Valley. And I believe truly that we're an anchor to the west here in the Treasure Valley. And to be incorporated in that perspective is important to me. So Vivian, I so appreciate her comments and saying, hey, we want to represent Caldwell. And I think at the end of the day, I just want you all to know that I don't believe that any staff member has pride tied to this name. I feel like we want what's best for Caldwell. I really feel that way. And in the end, we're going to go in whatever direction we need to. But I feel like at times we might be working at cross purposes if we're all over the place. So I just want you to know that we want to be in the same direction, but I also want you to know how we arrived at this point in terms of the name from a regional perspective and economic development perspective. It's no different from the Hampton Roads Executive Airport in Virginia, which is in Norfolk, or the Triangle North Executive Airport in Lewisburg, North Carolina, or the Tri-Cities Airport in the Washington area. It's no different from those names and the way that we approach this topic. I know I'm over time, I apologize, so there for any questions.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Any questions from council? Councilor Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just don't want to miss an opportunity to tell Mr. Jenkins how much he and Ophelia are appreciated, that your efforts go beyond what we even know, and I don't want to miss the opportunity to publicly state how much that's appreciated. And I remember your testimony from beforehand in favor of the name that was chosen in December, and I appreciate your comments, and I know whatever the outcome is here today, you'll continue to do the stellar job that you do for the city, and thank you again.
Thank you so much. I very much appreciate that, that feedback, and again, it's just, I appreciate your leadership, truly, and leadership here on this council, and the mayor, of course. Couldn't do anything that we do without you all, so appreciate your support always.
Thank you so much. Any other comments or questions from council? For Mr. Yes.
I don't have anything from Mr. Jenkins, but I was wondering, I heard Brad, the first guy's testimony, and I'm scratching my head because I just don't understand. I need to clarify something with him if I could.
Yeah, the first, so Mr. is it Fraser? Did I say that right? Okay. Okay.
I apologize if this is a ridiculous question, because I'm not a pilot, so I don't understand. You said when your wife takes off from the airport, she says Caldwell Airport, something, something, Caldwell.
Right.
But everybody else that's in the air, the transit aircraft, is seeing a different name on their computer.
That's right.
So my question is, when a pilot takes off, whether it be your wife or anybody else, why are they not taking off saying Treasure Valley Airport?
Because they were instructed by airport management to say Caldwell. They were instructed by airport management to say Caldwell. That's why they don't say Treasure Valley.
I mean, if it's on the map, Treasure Valley, or on I know there's a name for the instrument, but I don't know what that is. I would be saying that name because I would not want to have that interaction that you're discussing.
Absolutely. We don't want any mid-air incursions. That's exactly the point.
But I'm just wondering why
The
we're still
reason Wendy
using
says
Caldwell if the
Caldwell
name
is
different.
because airport management told her to. Airport management told everybody flying in Caldwell to say Caldwell, despite the name change. Because presumably they recognize the safety issue. I don't know why, but do you see the irony? Airport management is instructing Caldwell Airport users to say Caldwell in their radio calls. I don't have a better answer for you.
Okay, well, and that was what I was
Airport
confused about.
management told her to, that's why.
Okay, and that was my confusion. I didn't understand why we would be saying.
I don't
that.
understand it either, other than somebody must understand there's a potential for mid-air incursion or confusion. Because sectionals and software all say Treasure Valley, but we've been instructed to say Caldwell. So let's just all get on the same page and call it Caldwell. Doesn't that make sense?
All right, well, thank you, I appreciate it. I just didn't understand what was going on
Do you understand?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Okay, so is everybody that signed up for the testimony portion? So. I didn't sign up. I guess we are still open. So come forward. So we want to be careful not to jump back and forth because we need to allow others to testify after on that.
Which side is he testifying on?
In favor, I believe, in support, correct?
Or neutral?
Now come on forward, come on up to the microphone, so. She'll have you sign up.
I'm sorry, I didn't know what. My name is Darrell Ford. I live at 16313 Frost Road in Caldwell.
Very good, then you have 2 minutes and the time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. When I'm at home, I can get a handheld radio on the frequency that's used at Caldwell Airport, and I know where everybody is in the air. I know exactly where they are. Whenever they make a turn, I know exactly where they are. When I go to some strange place, like when he's talking about people coming in from other areas, okay, they're looking at their charts, which you call maps, okay, and it'll say Caldwell Airport. If the map's been changed to Treasure Valley, everybody knows this is Caldwell. If you keep Caldwell in it, all I understand is, what do I have to say when I'm in the air? You know, you can call it anything you want, but what do I call it in the air?
Right.
And we've got helicopters, we've got airplanes, light aircraft, and there's larger aircraft that come straight in. Talk about a melee when somebody's coming straight in. you know? I don't think you know what that means, but instead of being in the pattern, he just comes in. We don't know where he is. Okay, but you tell him where you are with, Caldwell area traffic, okay? Cessna 5657 Romeo is turning, left downwind for 2-1, okay, or 1-2. And, I end that with Caldwell area traffic, the front of it and the end of it. Every time I make a turn, when somebody else is in the pattern, they're calling where they are too, and I know exactly where they are. So, the Caldwell part of it is very important to pilots. Okay, that's pretty easy to understand. That makes it safe for us.
Okay, very good. Excellent. Any questions? Do you have any questions, follow up on that, or?
But if I
clarify
understand
that?
it right, as long as everybody is using the same name, everybody has the same understanding of where you're at in space, right?
Right. In Treasure Valley, nobody knows what that is.
Okay.
Right.
Is there any, do you have any
No,
further
I'm good,
questions
thank
for this? Any questions from council? Okay, thank you so much. We appreciate that clarification, so. Okay, very good. So that concludes, for the testimony portion. Is there a motion to close public testimony on this item? Very good. So we have a motion from, it wasn't a public hearing, so, well, we can still do that. So we have a motion to close the public testimony portion of this hearing in a second. Counselor Doty, all those in favor?
Aye.
Very good, motion passes. Okay, so it moves us on to this resolution. Again, this is a resolution of the mayor and council of the city of Caldwell, Idaho, directing staff to work with the Federal Aviation Administration to accomplish a change of the name of the city's airport to the Caldwell Executive Airport. So that is before you. So if you have additional questions for staff, I know they're here and willing to answer those. Any questions for each other or any discussion or comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Stoddard.
just like to make a few comments. First of all, the cost of changing the signs is gonna be very minimal. We understand from our last commission meeting, it was under $100, wasn't it, Brent? Something like that? Or under 500, what was it? So it's not gonna be a big issue. Was that? $200 to $300, so I.
Glad you remembered, because I didn't.
Okay, okay. Anyway, my opinion on this is, first of all, you know, when I was attending these meetings, I asked myself, so who are our customers here? Who are the customers that really support this airport? And it's GA, and I didn't know what GA was at the time, but it's General Aviation, which are these people that are sitting there. Those are the ones that support the airport. When you look at an executive, at the plan and everything relative to the name change, I don't see any large corporations moving into Caldwell, like Micron, Simplot, Engineer Structures. I mean, that's just not gonna happen. I mean, those folks are gonna stay up there in the Boise area. So, you know, the executive part of the Caldwell Airport is not gonna support the cost of it, in my opinion. Relative to safety, I've been flying into this airport in my prior life since about 1979, but I was on a trip one time with my prior employer, and we had a problem with safety in Nebraska where they changed the name to something else compared to what we had it on the charts, and we were flying a Hawker 700, which takes a little bit longer runway than a Cessna does. But we had the same problem. It was a safety issue for us, and for about 15 minutes there, the pilots I know were awful nervous about can they land a plane on this runway. Eventually, we wound up with an old Air Force base that we flew, you know, which had a longer runway, and then we drove the rest of the way. But, so safety is an issue, and the emails that I've gotten so far coincide with what Mr. Fraser said. That I think he said yikes or something like that. But the ones that I got, I didn't have one that said that it's not a safety issue. Resulting as far as consulting firms and what they recommend. I've been involved with a lot of consulting firms over my 30 years plus with my prior company, and a lot of times the information you give to those consulting firms are only as good as the information you give them. And sometimes they can make some comparisons with other entities or companies, but you know, good information out, or good information in, good information out. A lot of times we took their their recommendations if we thought it would help the company. But many times, more so than not, we did not take their recommendations. So anyway, just having said that, I just think that we need to keep the name simple for safety reasons, and we have to remember who our customers are, which is general aviation, not executives. It's not to say that we don't have some executive or business that will come in there. I hope we do, but I don't see major corporations building headquarters here where we might, in the long-term future, even see executive hangars that would support this airport. I don't think it's gonna happen, so, as long as Boise is there, so, that's my 2 cents worth.
Very good.
Thank you.
So much. Any other comments or discussion from any council members? Okay, are there any motions for
Mr.
adoption
Mayor?
of this resolution? Yes, Counselor Register. You just beat them, just barely.
Yeah, finally. I move that we authorize the name change of the city's airport to the Caldwell Executive Airport and direct the staff to work with the Federal Aviation Administration to accomplish that change.
Very good. So we have a motion from Counselor Register, for approval of this resolution, authorizing that name change as was stated. Do we have a second of that motion? So a motion from Counselor Register and a second from Counselor Stodic, for approval of this resolution. Is there any discussion from the council? Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. That moves us on to, very good. Thank you for sticking with us. So, I guess it's not too late yet, so we'll see how we continue this night. So you're welcome to stay with us if you like, or we won't be offended, trust me, if you get up and leave, so. As long as none of the council members follow with you, so. Okay. So action item number 2 is to consider approval of resolution number 315-22, and so I'm gonna, it's a little long, so I'm just gonna read. What's that? Yeah, there's a good chance, yeah, so it is a little long, so I'm just gonna read it by title rather than the entire resolution, on that. So, this is resolution, again, as I said, number 315-22, approved resolution in support of restoring passenger rail service known as the Pioneer from Portland to Salt Lake City with a stop at Caldwell, advocating for a framework to support such an effort and providing an effective date. So real quick, I'll just give a little background on this. So there's a lot of movement going towards restoring some of these passenger rail services. I was able to attend a conference in Montana last month discussing this. I want to make sure that Caldwell is at the table on this one, first in line. With the improvements we've done to our downtown, with the Indian Creek Plaza, with the Christmas lights, this could be a great boon for Caldwell, bringing that in. I could foresee us, advertising in Portland and Seattle, saying, hey, do a day trip to Caldwell, come and see the lights, come to our downtown, stay at our hotel. You can jump on the train and land literally right at the doorstep of the hotel. Stay a night or two and then jump back on there and head back home. So it could be a real boost for Caldwell, and also even for, if you live here in Caldwell, if you're wanting to travel to Seattle or wanting to travel all the way to Chicago, if this line was put back in place, you could do that by rail. And so this is just, again, a resolution. Just wish we had the authority to just approve it and bring it in. We don't, but what we can do is follow suit of other cities, showing that support and that we are fully behind this. Any little bit that we can do, I think, is a great thing. With ARPA money, there's been a lot of additional funds possibly to do these. The rail's already there, so it's not really an additional cost for that. It's just getting, Amtrak to start coming back here and seeing the benefit of doing that. So this resolution just states that and our support in moving that forward on that. So that's really what this is all about, so.
I have some questions.
Yes.
So is Amtrak the one that's gonna actually make it happen? We're just saying we're on board?
Are you, yes, that's a great pun, by the way, on board. So yes, it really boils down to, Amtrak, so this line was in existence from 1977 to 1997, and was closed at that time due to budget cuts. And so we're hoping with additional funding that's been fueled back into that perhaps they will reconsider bringing this back.
So is there any cost to the city, like with our train station, or having to put anything in there to
There
sell
might be-
tickets or do anything? I mean, I don't.
Yeah, there might be
exactly know how
minimal
much.
cost if we needed to. I mean, everything is still pretty much there, so it would be, kind of like we're talking about the airport name change. It's is pretty minimal in that regards. Like I said, and that's the great thing about Caldwell, where we're trying to get that, Nampa's also flows through there, but their train station is a museum right now. It's owned not by the city. Ours is owned by the city, and literally we could have that thing ready within a few weeks if it came back. So I think we're, again, primed for that little, stop here in Caldwell, and we want to just do everything we can to we want to be at the table. And
You know if Boise's gonna get on board with this? The only reason I ask is now we're talking about the, benefit to people who work in Boise, live here, and traffic.
Yes, so Boise actually did this resolution last year, so they're fully on board as well. Actually, Mayor McLean, had a news press release, just a few days ago, in regards to stating that, all the mayors here in the valley, we've signed on saying, yes, we're in support. We had a meeting, Brent was able to fill in for me because I was not able to attend, with Amtrak, in Boise last month also. So, yes, City of Boise is fully on board with this.
Eventually be utilized for something like that as well.
Yep, so. Okay. Any other discussion, or?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor Stoddard.
I just wanted to repeat the discussion you and I had. Probably the biggest cost for this, if it wasn't there, would be the spur. And I think, Brent, that spur was never taken out, was it? Next to the depot there?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Stoddard, you're correct.
Okay, so that's in there, so it's a natural, it's just refurbishing maybe the depot a little bit, and then we're off and running.
Yep, yeah, no, I think it'd be great. So, yes, Councilor Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned this to me, and I was really excited about it from the standpoint of having traveled abroad and seeing how transit is used, and especially in other cities in the United States, having better transit, better public transit, better opportunity. I'm all in favor of, I suppose my comment, and the only thing I want to be optimistic about is that this time it'll work, because the Amtrak system has been subsidized by the federal government forever. It's never, to my knowledge, been a moneymaker. It's just, it's been I don't want to call it a boondoggle, but it without the federal government supporting it, it wouldn't have lasted even as long as it has. So my hope is that if we could have more transit, I would love to be able to ride the train to Boise or to Portland or somewhere like that. I've ridden trains in many other cities. I know getting landing in Burbank, California, I can jump on a train and get to where I need to be, or I've taken the coastline all the way down to San Diego, and there's benefits to it. I suppose my fear is being outweighed by my hope at this point, if that makes any sense.
Any other discussion? Okay, do we have any, oh, yes, Brent.
Mr. Mayor, you can throw me out of here if you want. I apologize. Would it be okay, Mr. Mayor, if I give a couple comments having represented that meeting? I just want to state just a couple things. One of them, Councilman Stoddard, I apologize because I thought, this is what I get for exiting the room for a minute. I thought you were talking about the Boise Depot. Their siding is still in place. Ours would probably have to be restored. Ours is not adjacent to the platform right now.
Okay, restored meaning what?
We would have to build just a siding to come off of that, yeah. And I'm not a railroad expert, so I'm not exactly sure that's how it works, but I believe it is. The second thing, there was great support for this, and I get the impression we met for about 2 hours with a couple of folks from Amtrak, and also there was representation from Federal Railroad Administration. I get the impression that they are really working hard to get this thing moving nationally. There is grant funding included in some of the recent federal bills that could help accomplish this, both what might be a state share, because some of the stuff inside the state is required to be funded by the state under Amtrak's rules, and and so I guess with appropriate respect for all those who have led Amtrak in the past, it appears that they're under new management, so to speak, and they're really looking at how they expand this and make it profitable, at least profitable enough to pay for itself. The last thing I'd like to add is the Community Planning Association of Southwest Idaho we're required to have a metropolitan planning organization. That's ours, and that's a requirement for us to be able to receive federal funding for road improvements and intersection improvements. They've done a number of surveys, and they do those surveys very well, and they get a impressive reach through the valley. It is something that repetitively comes back in the surveys they conduct, that people would like to see rail transportation within the valley. when we run the numbers and say, oh, bus rapid transit is cheaper, rail is something that people want, and I don't believe that they can really be compared, because if you say, hey, if you're gonna go to, an inner city, are you willing to take your family on the train? Yes. Are you willing to take your family on the bus? Maybe less yeses, right? There's some charm to the train. And so I think the idea would be to compare to areas that have installed a light rail in their communities. I say that only because I think we're getting to a point where there's good support from the valley-wide community for both this kind of interstate travel and even local travel with rail. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Very good. Okay. With that, do we have any motions for approval of this resolution?
So moved.
Very good. Do we have a second?
Second.
So I have a motion to approve resolution number 315-22 from Counselor Stoddard and a second from Counselor Register. Is there any discussion on the motion? Very good. With that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. That moves us on to action item number 3. This is consider acceptance of the recommendation from the Impact Fee Advisory Committee regarding impact fees and set the public hearing date for October 20th, 2022. Mr. Orton, I had a feeling you were coming
Sorry.
back up.
Terrible
Yes.
night. I apologize.
That's all right. You can be brief, I'm sure.
Yes, sir. Essentially, Mr. Mayor, the Impact Fee Advisory Committee has met, they met just this past Tuesday. And so we anticipate from their efforts that we'll see an impact fee that will be proposed to the council for consideration that is above 5%. That means that a public hearing is necessary, and so we'll provide Madam Clerk has already, helped us to get notices in action to, bring forward something to you on the 20th of October. That said, the Impact Fee Committee, they understand that an important element of their charter is they've got to bring you, what is the impact fee that will support the capital improvement plan? Because that's really the statutory basis, for what that impact fee should be. The fee has to be able to cover the cost of the plan, or at least the eligible portions of the plan. And they do also have some concerns about, that fee level has impacts in terms of affordable housing, in terms of, home buyers. So that's something that you'll see coming from the committee, but they do understand that charter, and they will bring you a number that will pay for the capital improvement plan. And then they'll also share their thoughts with you and ask you for your consideration in, judging between that. The most operative thing, I guess, is if we reduce that fee, or if the council chooses to reduce that fee, we do have an obligation under state statute to make up the difference, to be able to afford that capital improvement plan. So you gotta find another funding source if we reduce the fee. And this is a tough thing to grapple with, because on one hand, you got the potential home buyers, and on the other hand, you got your taxpayers. So that's all I have, and that wasn't very short, and I'm sorry.
That's right. And this is just considering the acceptance, the actual public hearing will be in October.
Correct.
Correct. Okay, very good. So this again is,
Why
consider
the heck did I
acceptance
say all that?
We're just
of
changing
the
it.
recommendation for a public hearing date to be set for October 20th, 2022. Counselor Doty. Oh, I thought you were gonna make a motion. I saw you go to your mic.
We could do 3 and 4 at the same time. Is that possible?
Yeah.
Well, it's not, so we don't take.
Well,
the
they're
time
different
that-
dates, so maybe do,
Okay.
yeah. We have a motion to set the public hearing date for October 20th for the Impact Fee Advisory Committee recommendation.
So moved.
So we have a motion from Counselor Stoddard, second from Counselor Doty. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. October 20th will be the date. So the next item, this is consider acceptance of increase of fees over 5% of those previously charged, Water Department, and setting the public hearing date for October 6th, 2022. Do we have a motion to do so?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move that we move the date to October 6th.
Oh, did I?
Is that right?
Okay, October 6th. Very good. Did I say the wrong date? I may have. Is there a second?
What's the right? it's
Second.
October
Very good.
6th.
So we have a motion from Counselor Register and a second from Counselor Doty. Set the public hearing date for October 6th, to consider the fees over 5% for the Water Department. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. I'd say sorry for not letting you speak to that one, Brett, but I'm not, so.
Hear it twice.
Trying to
Brad.
make the
Good
motions
to listen
really
to you.
fast.
Very good. So I think the next one
like
must have been a
that.
bill and ordinance that was not part of a previous application. Is that correct, Ms. McCoy? So it's a bill, so typically when we do an annexation to PUD, there's a bill and ordinance that's associated with that we read into the record approved. Sometimes that gets missed, so we just bring it back for that. Was that the last hearing? Or
That was one that was taken off the consent calendar.
Oh, okay.
This was the one with the development agreement, there you go.
Oh, okay, very good.
Earlier
Excellent. And I need to read this by title only, correct? This one, okay, so I'm gonna read this title. So this is bill number 32, ordinance number 3426.
So,
And
before you, is this something we've already heard and just finishing up?
Yes.
Okay.
This is like the final step.
Yep, so this was approved at the last council meeting, if I'm not mistaken, in that regards, and so this is just the bill and ordinance to send to the state tax commission to make that change. Okay, so it says an ordinance determining that certain land lays contiguous to the city limits of the city of Caldwell, county of Canyon, state of Idaho, and that said land should be annexed to the city of Caldwell, Idaho as part of the R3 high-density residential zone, declaring said lands by proper legal description as described below to be a part of the city of Caldwell, Canyon County, Idaho, directing the city engineer and planning and zoning director to add said property to the official maps of the city of Caldwell, Idaho, repealing all ordinances, resolutions, orders, or parts thereof in conflict herewith, and directing the clerk of the city of Caldwell to file a certified copy of the ordinance map of the area to be annexed with Canyon County, state of Idaho, and the Idaho State Tax Commission pursuant to Idaho Code Section 63-215. So do we have a sponsor of bill number 32, ordinance number 3426?
Mr. Mayor,
Counselor Allgood.
I'll sponsor bill number 32, ordinance number 3426, and move for its passage and approve the summary for publication.
Very good. Do we have a second? Second. So the motion from Counselor Allgood and a second from Counselor Williams, for adoption of bill number 32, ordinance number 3426, move for its passage by title only, and approve the summary for publication. If you would please go ahead and vote. Voting is closed, and that motion passes unanimously. So that moves us on to action item number 6. This is a public hearing for case number OA 22-1. Request by the Planning and Zoning Department amending Chapter 10, Article 1, Section 10.1.2, Chapter 10, Article 3, Section 10.3.1, and Chapter 11, Section 11-1-2, pertaining to the duties of the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Director. Ms. McCoy, time is yours.
Thank you. So this request is by the Planning and Zoning Department to amend Chapter 10 and Chapter 11. Chapter 10 is the zoning ordinance, Chapter 11 is the subdivision ordinance. And after we reviewed the current Caldwell zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance, we determined that there was good cause for amending specific sections of the zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance pertaining to the duties of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the hearing examiner, and the Planning and Zoning Director. These amendments also necessitated some reorganizing and reformatting for consistency with the Idaho State Statute, Title 67, which is the Land Use Planning Act. To enhance the clarity, the draft ordinance has been reviewed and accepted by the city's legal counsel. And basically, what this comes down to is where our Planning and Zoning Commission is on hiatus. Even though it was in Caldwell City Code, a hearing examiner is not allowed to hear cases for annexations or comprehensive plan amendments. And so without a Planning and Zoning Commission, that left us in a position where these cases that had that type of land use issue in them were kind of in a holding pattern, and we didn't have a way to move them through. We did a little research and found that they can be, as long as there is a hearing body like the City Council, those can be done in one hearing step. And so what we want to do is amend the code so that for the time that the Planning and Zoning Commission is on hiatus, that land use hearings that have an annexation or a comprehensive plan amendment can go directly to the City Council and not have to go through the Planning and Zoning. And that is something that's allowable to change according to the Land Use Planning Act. We could change it and have just one hearing, then it is still considered put before the public for comment and discussion. So that's about all I have. It's pretty simple and straightforward, so I stand for questions.
Very good. I saw Counselor Stoddard.
Yes, so I understand this, so we would be the hearing body instead of the planning and zoning then, or how does that work?
Well, how it would work is that you are currently a hearing body, so most cases when they come in, with the exception of a special use permit, which just the hearing examiner or planning and zoning can hear, they have to go through that first, like, layer of a hearing body, and then they go to the city council or the board of county commissioners at the county level. So what this would do is basically, since we don't currently have a planning and zoning commission, make it so that cases that have an annexation or a comprehensive plan amendment can go directly to the city council for hearing, as opposed to having the step of the planning and zoning
Okay,
commission.
so it would be just those two categories then, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Everything else would go through the hearing examiner, as it does now. It was just, we would like to amend Caldwell's code because it had it in the code, the city code, that the hearing examiner could hear comprehensive plan amendments and annexations, and according to, the Land Use Planning Act, they are not able to hear that type of case.
I was concerned that we might have to hear everything, and we don't,
Yeah.
we don't have the
No.
expertise in some of that, so, thank you.
No, yeah, we'll keep you out of the special use permits.
Yeah, so it really doesn't change for us, but what it does do is it alleviates, because right now it's just recommendation. So
Mhm.
it alleviates the public from having to go to 2 meetings.
Correct.
Coming to 1,
Yeah, and it will really streamline that,
and staff as well.
Yes,
too.
yeah.
So, yeah, which, yeah, I'm
Thank
sure
you.
Julie appreciates. Counselor Williams, I know you had some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Why is the, Planning and Zoning Commission on hiatus? How long have they been on hiatus? Who put them on hiatus? What's removed them from the equation already?
That was actually maybe a question that Mr. Mayor, if you might be willing to address?
Yeah, so they're still formed, so I know they're not disbanded.
Mhm.
But I know I've reached out to some of the commission members and spoke to, well, the chair, Betsy Hunsicker, and I'm actually gonna meet with her hopefully here in the near future. So there were some issues that came up at a hearing, some confusion that started in how to proceed, and there was a bit of contention that came forward, and it got a little ugly, and so we wanted to just kind of step back, do some training with the Planning and Zoning Commission. I know we did have, a member of the Valley View School District actually reached out to us with concerns, regards to one of the Planning and Zoning Commission members reaching out to them, and in his words, stating that he was encouraging them to sue the city in regards to development that's being approved, things of that nature. So it gave us concern that a representative of the city is encouraging other agencies to sue the city. He was asked to resign, and he said, no, he's not gonna resign. So that's where we're like, well, let's just kind of, pause this and take things to, because the hearing examiner has some authority to hear items. And so then that's when, as they dug in deeper, found these issues that, well, actually, the P and Z needs to hear these if we're gonna have it. And so this code just allows that, but that's kind of the issue. So we're planning on doing some tricks. We're meeting with the chairwoman here in the near future, kind of see, do we redo, because there's some good commissioners on there, but so do we try to fill in some of the others? Do we just start from scratch? And that's where obviously we'd get some input from the council as well. Do we just start over with everybody new, or do we just kind of get rid of some of the ones that are causing some of the issues? So that's kind of where we're at right now and where that kind of came forward.
And I know Ms. Hunsicker, and she's, brilliant
Mhm.
in a lot of ways, and I appreciate the time and effort she's put into the Planning and Zoning Commission. How many, and I realize you're jumping in the deep water here because you've been with us for 6
About a
weeks?
month, yeah, a little over a month.
So thank you for being here, and appreciate so much that you are here.
Sure.
And the asset that you are to the city, so thank you for joining the city of Caldwell. Do you know if we've heard any cases already that have not gone before the Planning and Zoning Commission that would have?
There were a few before, I started that went to the hearing examiner that probably shouldn't have, but they continued on to the city council. So we're okay as far as those go. It was just something that when we realized that was being done, we were like, whoa, let's pull this back and stop here and figure out a way to proceed so that we're following the state statutes.
So is it, in fact, then, you're not proposing, or we're not proposing here to eliminate the Planning and Zoning Commission altogether?
No, not at all.
We're not moving them out, but help me because I'm not getting it. Which cases would they hear?
The Planning and Zoning Commission?
Yes.
Yeah, they can hear any case.
Can or would, I'm sorry.
They would. Currently, they cannot because they are, temporarily not meeting. So what this gives us, because we have a backlog of cases now that have, ordinance amendments and annexations included in the case, and we're kind of in a holding pattern right now, waiting for this ordinance to be approved, so that we can start bringing those cases directly to the city council, while the, issues with the Planning and Zoning Commission get sorted out.
And I hear what you're saying. It's appreciated because we need to sort things out, obviously,
Mhm.
from an administrative standpoint. But my, you know, when you talk about the hearing examiners, I've never met Mr. Eggleston, I don't believe, but when I read the minutes, that man asks some wonderful questions.
Yes, he does.
And I appreciate him being a hearing examiner
Mhm.
because I rely on those when I get to my packet so that I have a better understanding of what I'm voting on. I can't imagine me dealing with some of these without a planning and zoning commission as well, because when I read through their minutes, or if I've watched the YouTubes to see what's happening there, it's a tremendous help to me. I don't have the time, or the expertise to do what they do, and so I guess my concern really is that we not, let me put it in a positive way, my concern is that we would expedite resuming our Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on all of these cases, so that we have their input and the advantage really, of being able to approve these cases appropriately. And so I'm just a little concerned still and hoping that this isn't going to be a long drawn out problem. I don't even know how I feel about this ordinance change, to tell you the truth.
Yes, and I understand where you're coming from, and it's our hope to have the Planning and Zoning Commission, the issues resolved as quickly as possible. And we are also working, Robin Collins, the Deputy Director, and I have been working pretty intensely to change the way staff reports are written to offer much more guidance in our staff reports, so that as they come to you, there's gonna be a lot more, just clearer information, more concise, so that they're easier to understand and give you the information that you need.
And frankly, if I could add, one of the things I love about having the P and Z Commission meet, and I know, well, I think everybody would agree, there's a protection for us in one sense, that it removes kind of a political component from it.
Yes.
And that's important to me,
Mhm.
that we have that protection, so that and we could debate that, I know, but generally speaking, they're apolitical and they're helping us as they come in, so that we're not worried about being reelected or being elected, I suppose, in the first place, to hold a seat.
Yes, and I understand that, and as I said, this isn't something that we're proposing as a permanent solution. It will just give us some time so that the, things that need to be addressed with the Planning and Zoning Commission can be addressed, but we don't have people who've put an application in and are waiting for 6 months or 8 months for their application to be processed.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes, Counselor Allgood.
First of all, I wanna echo what Counselor Williams said. For me personally, being able to see what the Planning and Zoning Commission has done is very valuable, and I realize it eliminates a step by having them not there. It takes some workload off, but my biggest priority is to make sure that we're making the right decision on growth.
Absolutely.
And that is such a hard decision.
Mhm.
I believe we should have known that planning and zoning was on hiatus. We had no clue. But all that being said, again, I just want to echo what Councilor Williams said. The Planning and Zoning Commission is valuable, and I want to see it back as soon as possible.
Yes, and we would agree with you completely, because I do feel that there's a lot of value involved in that, and I know Mayor Wagner and is working through that situation along with Steve and Robin, because we would like to see it back as soon as possible. We just were trying to think of a way so that people don't have their cases waiting for months on end while this is resolved. I know it's really important for the development community particularly. They have a lot of money wrapped up in these, and if their case sits for months on end, that's just them losing money month after month. So we wanted to provide the best customer service we possibly could to the people that come to us and have to go through these applications.
Very good. Yes, Counselor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
No,
And I agree with you. It's one of the reasons it pains me ever to continue a case.
Yes.
Because time is money for a developer.
Yes.
Tens of thousands of dollars a day sometimes.
I know,
And
it's so
staff,
much.
and you're overloaded already, your staff, and you finally are full staff, right?
Yes, we
And
are.
so thankful for that, yes. But, I just wonder if we move ahead with this, is there not a way we can put in a direction or a time frame or a time limit for this? So that we can be ensured that the P and Z Commission would be off of hiatus? And is there any recommendation for how long that might take to get organized so that we can be back on track? And I don't know if you have, an idea about that, or Mr. Mayor, if you would have any kind of idea of what we're looking at to be able to resume full function of our Planning and Zoning Commission.
Yeah, I think definitely within the next couple of months, for sure, on that. Today, I know I'm meeting with, the chairwoman, in the next week or so, kind of talk with her on that, and then we probably do need to replace a commission member, maybe two, but probably one on that. So, sometimes that can be, because obviously it's volunteer, so sometimes it depends on who you can get to volunteer for that. But I think we'd be able to find some good replacements for that and to move kind of in that direction. So I think definitely within a couple months, we could have that kind of, and some training, obviously, is a big part of that, including, our city attorney, sitting down with them and just kind of, this is what, there was, some comments made on the record, basically saying, I will never vote for this because of that, I will never vote for that, which obviously creates a lot of issues in the future, because you're basically recusing yourself from everything if you're stating you're gonna vote no on that every single time it comes in. So just some training to, do not say this, be careful what you say in these regards. I mean, you can state it in different ways, but there's just some, items that were very, alarming, I think, to staff and to our attorneys. So I think some training, get some new members perhaps on there, on that. So I think, definitely within a couple months, we could get all of that taken care of.
Yes, I would agree, yeah.
Other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Just for clarification, so apparently, it's been discussed with Mr. Hiltier's office then that the chair has the ability to put their commission, so to speak, on hiatus, by statute or by ordinance?
Yeah, and I don't know if hiatus is the right word, just where the applications have been, I guess, because you have the hearing examiner and the planning and zoning commission, so moving those cases to the hearing examiner, that could be moved. And I think as that came up, it was realized that, standard practice, we'd always had annexations go to the hearing examiner, and it was discovered that according to, ILUPA, that they need to go to the planning and zoning commission. So I think there was something caught there that we hadn't have been implementing in that regard. So, I mean, they're still there, it's just the cases have been diverted. And we've done that in the past. I know when I was the planner, there was many times when we would divert cases depending on, the numbers coming in to the hearing examiner. Planning and zoning met maybe twice a year, when I was in there on the staff, because we would just divert a lot to the hearing examiner to get through a lot of those items a little quicker. So more, I think, maybe just being diverted to the hearing examiner, which opened a can of worms, like, oh, well, these really shouldn't be, they've been going there, so let's fix that problem.
Yes, yeah, that was exactly the rationale behind this, was just fixing that problem so that we're certain we're abiding by the state statutes but are still able to move our cases along, as effectively and efficiently as we possibly can.
And correctly, so.
Yes, that too.
Good job to clean that up, so. Okay, any other questions? Okay, perfect, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
And so, I know these things confuse me some, so we're on action item number 6. This is a request for amending chapter 10, article 1. And so I think we just need to close this and move to 7, is that correct? So do we have a motion to close, close this public hearing item?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
So we have a motion from Councilor Register and a second from Councilor Stoddard to close, action item number 6. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that moves us on to the consideration of this bill and ordinance. And I will read this by title only and then open it up for discussion from the council. So this is ordinance number 3449, bill number 55, an ordinance enacted by the Caldwell City Council amending chapter 10, article 1, section 1012, chapter 10, article 3, section 1031, and chapter 11, article 1, section 1112 of the Caldwell City Code pertaining to the duties of the Planning and Zoning Commission and Director, providing for an effective date, providing for severability, and repealing all ordinances, resolutions, orders, and parts thereof in conflict herewith. So that is the ordinance bill, so for any sponsorship or any discussion on this proposed ordinance and bill.
So, I just wanna clarify, I completely understand what's going on, I just wanna clarify. We're changing this bill, and it'll probably stay in the form we change it to, but it's temporary in how we're operating.
Yeah, I believe this provides some flexibility.
That's correct.
that regard.
That's the way we drafted it, so that it would provide some flexibility. So it's in no way a permanent, it's drafted in such a way to just provide that ability to have hearings go directly to the city council if they need to.
Okay. All right.
Do we have any discussion or any motions?
I'm assuming by Mr. Hilty's silence that there's nothing else we need to know legally, that it fits with Idaho code and we don't have any problem with this, and you'd already be letting me know if it didn't.
Yes, we did.
Doug this afternoon,
All right, Mr. Mayor,
Okay, Counselor Allgood.
I'll move for the passage of bill number 55, ordinance number 3449, apologize.
Very good. So we have a motion for sponsorship of bill number 55, ordinance number 3449, a request for move for its passage by title only and approving the summary for publication. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, very good. So do we have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion from Counselor Allgood and a second from Counselor Register. And we do need a roll call vote on this, so the machine is open. And all votes are tallied, so we'll close the voting. And motion passes 4-1, and for those out there in Cyberland, so Mr. Williams did vote, against the proposal, and the other 4 counselors did vote in favor, so that does pass 4-1.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you, and I want to support our wonderful P and Z department entirely. I think it was more of a no vote of just not being happy that we need to wait that long, and so I would respectfully request that within 2 months, we address this again as a council to know where we're at in that, if that's a fair estimation of what it would take. And perhaps we could set it on the calendar as even an agenda item 2 months from now to come back and get an update of where we're at with our planning and zoning. Is that?
Yeah, no, and I think actually we have a workshop already with planning and zoning, I think.
In October.
So we could get an update then, so for sure.
Yeah, I would be happy to provide that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
and thank
of
you, Mr.
course.
Mayor.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that moves us to action item number 8, I believe, is that correct? Is that where we're at? Sure. Sounds like it. Okay, consider acceptance of the finance report.
Mr. Mayor,
Counselor Doty.
Finance Committee has reviewed current accounts payable in an amount of $4,231,111.35 for the period ending September 9, 2022, and net payroll of $435,661.55 for pay period ending August 27, 2022. I move that accounts payable in the amount of $4,231,111.35 represented by check numbers 164521 through 164771 and payroll for the amount of $435,661.55 represented by checks numbers 37557 through 37582 and direct deposits be accepted, payments approved, and vouchers filed in the office of the city clerk.
Okay, do we have a second?
I missed some of that. Can you do that again?
You can read it again if you like. Which numbers did you want?
So we have a motion from Counselor Doty for acceptance of the finance report. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Counselor Stoddard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. It is. Council reports, Councilor Register.
Nope.
Good. Councilor Stoddard.
The only comment I want to make is, I couldn't make the urban renewal meeting you guys had the other night, because it was late, I was out of town, but again, I think we need to emphasize, the only person I could really hear clear through the microphones was Mr. Porter. So, yeah, I could hardly hear you and the rest of them. I mean, so we need to get these things close when we, so,
Yes.
anyway, thank you.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. Councilor Doty.
I'm going to pass tonight.
Councilor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, our best wishes for Sergeant Mike Wendler and for a speedy and complete recovery. State trooper who was hit by an inattentive driver on, was he on a traffic stop, Brad?
He was just directing traffic from a previous car fire.
And, terrible. It could have been so much worse, and in fact, it was worse, but by God's graces and providence, he's recovering. I'd also like to congratulate you, Mr. Mayor, on your first MIAC meeting, and I don't know if you were gonna share something about it, but I counted 60 on a rough count, and for having been on hiatus, and for the work your staff did, and no doubt Brian put a lot of legwork into that, but congratulations on just a tremendous turnout, and I couldn't stay for the whole thing, but it was just so reassuring to be here and see that room full and these students that were so, I think, excited to be in touch with the mayor of the city they live in and go to school in, and it's commendable. I want to thank Mr. McDonald, Mr. Orton, and you, Mr. Mayor. The water's not flowing anymore. I know I'm stuck on that, but I've said something about it for a month now, and so I want to come back to it and say, you know, while the problem isn't solved, temporarily it's resolved, and staff, no doubt, has done much more work than I know about, and I think it is important, and I appreciate it. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say, but thank you for just what you do for the city.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate that. Councilor Allgood.
I wanted to thank you for the email you sent out regarding when we're absent from. I appreciate that, and I will be absent the next meeting, and I will send in an email, you know, just for clarification, but I appreciate that, that's thoughtful.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate that very much. So, yeah, if there's ever anything that you all can think of or whatever to make these better or more efficient, let me know, or appropriate. So always open for that. And thank you so much for those comments. So I'm gonna up that number though, 77 is what was counted. So this room was packed with youth. We broke all-time records for attendance for Mayor's Youth Advisory Council and all the years they've been doing it. We actually had a party at my house last night, also for the Mayor's Youth, and had a great turnout, 50-plus kids. All the Caldwell kids weren't there because they had their Powder Puff football game because of homecoming, but we still had over 50 kids there, eating hot dogs and hamburgers, playing volleyball, just having a great time. So it was neat. There was one, maybe I'll just real quick, one girl that was there, very quiet, very shy, kind of off by herself at the beginning, but by the end, you couldn't get her to shut up. So it's just neat to see them kind of make those friends and associations. And so, what's that?
Nothing.
So anyway, so it was great. So anyway, thank you for that comment. Excited to continue growing that in the future. So that is all I have. So with that, is there a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion from Councilor Register, a second from Councilor Stoddard to go into executive session. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll? Because we just lost our monitor. Yes. Oh, there we go. So.
I believe we need.
Oh, yes, thank you, sorry.
I'll go ahead and do that.
Okay, perfect, yes, please do.
Mr. Mayor, I move we move into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code Section 74-206 and subsection 1B, and for tonight, we're including 1C. We added that at the agenda change. For the purpose of discussing evaluation, dismissal, or discipline of or hear complaints brought or charges against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent. Subsection 1I, for the purpose of engaging in communications with a representative of a public agency's risk manager or insurance provider to discuss the adjustment of a pending claim or prevention of a claim imminently late to be filed. And subsection 1C, for the purpose of discussing the acquisition of or interest in real property not owned by a public agency.
Good. Thank you so much for fixing that. So we do have that motion. Do we have a second on that one?
Second.
Very good. So I apologize for the previous motion bearers. So we have a motion for Counselor Allgood, second from Counselor Doty, to go into executive session as was detailed. Yes, we do need roll, so if you want to go ahead and vote, it is open.